O tempora, o more, it's happy times and places, a Doctor Who commentary podcast with a positive inclination. I, Toby Haydock, have asked a friend to choose a Doctor Who story that they have a favourite thing from each episode for, and I have to watch along, commentate, and guess what those favourite things are.
Hi, Toby. Thanks for inviting me to this podcast. I am very honoured to be here talking about one of my favourite stories of all time. When Toby first emailed me, the first thought came to my mind was I want to do the Romans, and I was so happy no one had done it yet. Originally, I watched Torchwood, then I watched the new series of Doctor Who, and then I watched the classic series. So I have a really weird relationship with learning old Doctor Who. So when I was in high school, I only had like one or two friends who had watched the classic series, and they were very much one of those old guard where they were like, oh no, you couldn't possibly like the Romans, no. So I felt like I couldn't like this story. So when I eventually got to this story, I approached it saying, you know what, ignore what everyone else said. I'm going to enjoy it how I want to enjoy it. And I sat down and I couldn't stop laughing throughout the entire thing. And at that moment I thought, oh no, this is what I love about Doctor Who. This is why it's my era of the show. So I thought this would be perfect for this podcast where it's talking about a more positive side of the show, when a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about the Romans. For each individual episode, I've chosen a different way of approaching my favourite moment. For episode 1, I have chosen a scene, and for episodes 2, 3, and 4, I have chosen dialogue. And then for my fifth and final moment, I'm talking about the entire story as a whole, and I've chosen one particular scene, which is my absolute favourite part of the entire story. So good luck, Toby.
What has the Romans ever done for us? Well, it's done this podcast. Hello. And I'm grateful to Josh, who flatters me by being on this podcast, because Josh is one of the new people who has used the medium of the internet to very skillfully and effectively, those videos that Josh does are amazing, convey their enjoyment and enthusiasm and knowledge of the show, and is really an innovator in the medium of the internet. And so I'm flattered that they've been associated very much with this unplugged, old school, one person and a microphone kind of thing, rather than that brilliant sort of, monologues where you cut within the monologue and the person jumps back slightly, but it keeps the flow, and it means that you can do several takes and choose your best bits, and it's the way that things shoot without having to worry about whether the picture completely matches and stuff, because we've kind of got over that, and it's a very modern way of doing things, and that's what Josh even did on the introductory video there. And has done also, and of course, typically because they put themselves out there in the world of YouTube, I think occasionally gets a bit of stick as well, which must be very dispiriting when all you're doing is, conveying your love for the show. So I am very happy to embrace Josh as somebody who could easily dismiss me as one of the old fuddy-duddies for coming and joining me as one of the earliest people to sort of be asked and send something pretty much instantaneously. So I'm sorry it's been hanging around in the archives of Happy Times and Places for a while, but I mix and match the stories and release things depending on when I fancy watching them, or what the last release was, or what I've got lined up. So it's no reflection on Josh that this one was probably recorded when the universe was less than half its present size. I'm reminded by Josh's introduction that people are sniffy about the Romans. That surprises me every time I hear it, and then it ceases to be a surprise, because I remember actually seeing it on I mentioned it in another podcast recently, the all-time clangers and all-time classics, but all-time clangers in DWB, and I think the Romans was quite high on the Hartnell list, and I think the general feeling, because nobody was really watching the episodes in those days because they weren't available to most of us, was that if it had the audacity to be funny, it must not work. And I think a few of the interviews with the people who'd started to be interviewed, like Verity Lambert and Christopher Barry, I remember Christopher Barry had said he thought that the burning of Rome had not been particularly successful, and I think Lambert had decided the out-and-out comedy had been an experiment that hadn't quite worked. So I think that gave fans, who'd seen it once, 10, 15 years ago, and were now, scoring things out of 10 or whatever, went, that one. And historicals have always suffered as well, I think, a bit. But now I think we can see everything, honours even out a little bit, and it's all a matter of taste in terms of, how good the productions are. There's not an awful lot of difference to the modern eye between anything that goes on in the 60s, really, and that fire effects in episode 4 is no worse than a lot of other things that surround it. So Christopher Barry's memory of his disappointment at that shouldn't really affect us now. I'm also interested that Josh clearly went to school with lots of or the Doctor Who fan friends from the early days were fusty old Englishmen going, "Oh no, you shouldn't like the Romans." Was Josh in the green room of a rep theatre the night of, "I don't think that's very good." I like that. I like Josh's voice, the dismissive fustiness of people who dislike the Romans. But because as I watch this, it has just been released as part of the season 2 box set on Blu-ray, which I'm flattered and pleased to have had a contribution on, doing a documentary about David Whittaker wearing an outfit combo I now regret, that seemed like what I wanted to wear at the time, and I just think it looks really messy, and it will of course be there forever and will haunt me and cast a shadow over a piece of work that loads of people have been very, very nice about, and all I could think about is, why did I put that shirt on, which I couldn't do up, and have that inside a jacket and outside a t-shirt, and have a neckerchief that was deliberately sort of slightly floppy and voluminous by its design, and therefore look a bit of a mess, and those burgundy trousers, which were new, aren't quite the colour scheme that I thought they were going. And instead of just going, I made a nice documentary that people liked about David Whittaker. But Whittaker is important because, of course, he's just stepped away, or is just about to stepped away from being script editor, and Spooner, who wrote this, becomes the new script editor. And I think, whilst Whittaker is very much the architect of much of Doctor Who as we know it, and certainly many of the stronger points of that first year, I think without Spooner, perhaps Doctor Who wouldn't be the show that it is today, because Spooner with his comedic chops. And that's very interesting that both of those script editors are vital in different ways. And I think Whittaker is probably rightly seen as the greater figure in the history of Doctor Who, and probably a more sort of grown-up and literary writer. But that's because we all think comedy is easy and somehow beneath us. I speak as a professional stand-up comedian. Whereas, of course, comedy is really hard, and you have to be quite clever to do it. But we have a sort of mistrust of comedy, or we have a mistrust of comedy that takes itself too seriously. Therefore, the comics that we love have to have this kind of veneer of it's just I'm just a clown. Whereas, of course, you're not just anything if you can hold a room full of people, in hilarity. For an hour, or write a script that is constantly serving you with laugh after laugh after laugh after laugh. That it's not just something you just sort of rattle off, But we view comedy as somehow a lesser art form than a story that is perhaps more philosophical. And also, we as Doctor Who fans, Doctor Who is terribly serious, of course, but Doctor Who wouldn't survive without its sense of humour. And yet, if it doesn't take itself seriously enough, that's fatal. So there's lots of interesting stuff to talk about with the Romans, which is why we're 7 minutes in and I haven't actually started the episode yet. Now watch me run out of things to say. So thanks to Josh, who I really like as a presence, as an energy, as a commentator, and is a very inventive and gifted communicator using the modern mediums of video messaging on the internet. I am now going to talk into a microphone and watch the television, which are about two technological things I can just about muster, sometimes both at the same time. And the slave traders are going to open for business in 3, 2, 1. I don't know why I did that massive monologue at the beginning, where I could have been saying some of that stuff during the episode itself. This is quite a special story for me because it was one of the first stories that I did a DVD commentary for. At the time, it could well have been one of the only two. I did this and The Rescue at the same time. I can't believe there is no photographic evidence of that. I was quite shocked to turn up and to find that there was nobody there with a camera, and it was the days before iPhones and stuff. So anyway, and here's, we start with the cliffhanger from the previous story, The Rescue, which I did for Happy Times and Places ages and ages ago. The wonderful Andrew Ellard, pointing out, I was interested, it was because having done that and commentated upon The Rescue, and said, it's a murder mystery with only one suspect, Andrew quite rightly points out, well, it's not really a murder mystery. It doesn't set itself up as that. It's a different kind of story. It's only that we now view it, hindsight can sort of make us take aspects for granted or have a view of a story that is kind of wrong. And I think The Romans is, maybe suffers from that a little bit as well, because it's seen as Doctor Who's first attempt at out-and-out comedy. But I think it's more interesting than that. And, of course, we have the cliffhanger, and it's a great cliffhanger, the TARDIS falling off a cliff. And I remember a friend of mine, one of the first sort of older fans that I met, and I didn't really like the idea of I remember being really surprised at the end of An Unearthly Child when I watched it as part of the Five Faces of Doctor Who, when they had the cliffhanger leading into the Daleks. And I remember thinking, but that's harder to categorise, because I liked each story being a story, and suddenly if you're leading into the next one, that blurs the lines. It's a bit like all these doctors we have now. There's no reason for me to be uneasy about them, but it's because it makes it harder for me to categorise in my head, and that makes my sort of brain space slightly muddier than I would like it to be. There's no sort of artistic justification for and yet I also like the fact that each story leads into the other, because it means that they're constantly keeping the adventuring going. The writers are having to be inventive. You end the story and you go, now I've got to come up with a piece of jeopardy out of nowhere, because we've essentially just got rid of all of the jeopardy. And that's quite fun, seeing how inventive different writers are and how they approach luring us into the next story. But it does mean that no story you can quite watch on your own, and that's then me, having an eye on, but what if I was watching this with the casual viewer, and they'd go, well, but is that story not ended then? You go, no, it's because... But I also remember, and this is where the story ended for me, because for ages I had episode 1 on the end of an E180 that had got something else on. I think it had got the last 3 episodes or something, and then the Aztecs, and then this was the first 6 or 7 minutes or whatever, and it ran out here. So for ages I had like the first half dozen minutes of the Romans and nothing else, which meant I took then ages to get the rest of it, because I kind of like, well, I've got a feel for it, I've seen a bit of it, I own a bit of it. Yes, I remember this friend of mine, Dan, one of the first sort of older Doctor Who fans I met. He said he didn't like the cliffhangers leading from one story to the other, because it made it unbelievable. It suggested that everywhere they went there was danger. Whereas if we only check in on Doctor Who when he's having adventures, you could go, well, it might have had a year passed without anything happening. That is more believable than going from frying pan to fire. But of course this does both, because we have the cliffhanger that it then dispenses with and goes, actually no, that was fine, it just fell off the cliff, they were fine. And this story takes pains to point out at various instances in this episode where they go, and we've been here for months. And I love that. I love the idea that they've come to Rome and they haven't immediately started adventuring. What they've done is they've found this abandoned villa, and again they drop that in case the viewer's going, hang on, where did they find that villa? And they go to great pains to point that out for the cynical viewer, and establish that situation. And I like that. I like that my beloved TARDIS crew have had a bit of time doing what you would do if you were able to, is set up house in an abandoned villa in Rome, and eat grapes and get hammered. And I like all the stuff that the Doctor did in that scene with Ian, talking about the pipes instead of the aqueducts, and throwing a bit of educational stuff into there. And here are the slave traders of the title, Sevchiria and Didius. Didius is played by Nick Evans. It took me a while as a kid to put 2 and 2 together and realise that Nick Evans, who is the Slither, and Nicholas Evans, who plays Didius, so Slither in Dalek Invasion of Earth, were one in the same. So yeah, Nick Evans has been rewarded for his turn as the Slither with his face on camera and one of the rare beard but no moustache combinations in Doctor Who and indeed TV drama as a whole. And he's in the first episode of this in human form, having been a Dalek and the Slither, and he comes back as an uncredited Dalek in Power of the Daleks as well. But let's not get into that. And I've done, so he did the commentary for this when I did the commentary for the Romans, of which we have, and the Rescue, of which we have no photographic evidence. I made sure to bring cameras to future ones, but even then, there are not as many photos of any of the commentaries I did that I would like there to be. For some, there's like one from each episode or whatever. And I would love it if there'd been budget or time to think of, or bodies, or I'm sure anybody would have loved to turn up and bring a camera. So Simon Harries, a friend of mine, eventually used to come, to watch and brought his camera. But it took a while. And here's Margot Thomas as the stall holder, who I think is mentioned in one of the Watchers or Nick Pegg's columns in Doctor Who magazine, because he worked with her on a play, and she was still going, into the 1990s. Had a long career. One episode in this, never troubles Doctor Who again. In fact, there's lots of people in this episode who are only in this one episode. The Romans is one of those stories where the guest cast sort of come and go, which is why I think Derek Sidney here, who ended up in America, actually. When I was first looking at IMDb, he was still alive and kicking. He died in 2000, but was based over there in the States and working in or volunteering in theatre in San Diego. He'd retired as an actor in 1990. But I think this character was supposed to be a one-off character. He's one of the two slave traders, and he ends up sort of, when you get to Rome, becoming the kind of lead henchman at Nero's court for no real reason. I think I read somewhere, but it's a long time ago. But I think my instinct that is that him all the way through, because I hadn't quite worked out that it was that it had been a series of characters, or one or two different characters, and they'd gone, there's too many characters in this, so let's make the slave trader that we meet, who's a bit villainous in part one, be the guy who hangs around and does sort of villainous rabble rousing and stuff like that in the later episodes in Rome. So it's not everybody sort of jumping in and out, because I think he's the only character in all 4 episodes actually. Because everyone else sort of comes and goes a little bit, including here Maximus Battalion, who's about to go because Barry Jackson's mute assassin is about to kill him. It's quite grim. Now, because Roman times, I've just been watching The Caves of Androzani, which is a grim and dirty and dangerous Doctor Who story, and you could make a Doctor Who story with the same kind of atmosphere and pragmatic and cynical view of the expendability of life set in Roman times. But instead, they decide to do Doctor Who's sort of first and perhaps only farce, and I love it for that. And I love all of this stuff about larks' tongues and baked pomegranates. They do that again in the Fires of Pompeii, don't they? Where it seems to me a little bit more self-conscious, but I think it's because it's the Roman characters doing it, saying, "Oh, could I have some bees in honey?" or whatever it is that they ask for, and it's sort of almost like they're telling each other what Romans have to eat, which seems to me slightly more artificial than when it's done here, where they're sort of chatting about an alien food stuff, if you like, and educating us at the same time. And Hartnell is really rises to the challenge. They all rise to the challenge of the comedy. They all play the genre, but rarely, I think, without stepping into the bounds of ludicrousness. I mean, the Doctor's a slightly different kettle of fish, because he can be a character of extremes anyway. But I seem to recall in this episode he sort of varies between being slightly clueless, getting the wrong end of the stick, and being very wily, as the comedy requires, which is kind of naughty, because comedy should, the joke should arise organically. But the beauty is, of course, the Doctor can be any of those extremes of character, because he's this eccentric alien. and therefore it kind of gets away with it, and you clearly enjoy the fact that Hartnell is enjoying it and his co-stars are enjoying it, so it's all rather infectious, but there's a fine line there as well, because you don't want to watch actors having too much fun if you're not included in the fun. That seems a little bit like they're amusing themselves and not you, but I don't think that happens here. I think this is fun, and I think it's quite infectious. I love this team. Vicky's only just joined, and of course I love that bit earlier on when she's talking to Barbara and she said, I thought you just said you had loads of adventures and all I've done here is sit in a villa. And I do love that idea that they when they said, yeah, come along because all we do is have adventures. I love the way she's so excited and she does that jumping about and sort of young enthusiasm thing. I adore Ian and Barbara, and Hartnell is on great form. And of course, comedy is an essential part of Doctor Who. Comedy is hard to get right, because if you put too much comedy into Doctor Who, you ruin it. You don't want to break the spell. You don't want to be too arch about it. If you're postmodern and winking at the audience, it's a bit smug. You don't really like it, and it doesn't help with the drama. And of course, this has to be genuinely dangerous in places, and I think that is, and it has to be genuinely funny in places, and that takes a lot of, nifty judgment. And at this period in Doctor Who's history, apart from, I mean, Hartnell has funny bits and stuff, but and there are some comic characters in Marco Polo, but that I think are slightly more organic, because Marco Polo is quite a sort of lyrical script, so it has those they're sort of more colourful characters, really. Whereas, I don't know why I think, say, Wang Lo in Marco Polo is less of an arch comic device than the Roadworks Overseer in the Reign of Terror, which is what I was building to, where I'm saying, the first real examples of kind of comedy, and the Jailer, where Dennis Spooner sort of starts to take flight and, tells his, spying adventure in history, but brings his sort of comic sensibilities to it, where I'm going to now continue with my thesis and maybe skip over Marco Polo for now. And go, I love the way, by the way, that you don't have to put on a latex disguise or do much to, to fit in as 60s people in ancient Rome. You just have to brush Ian's hair. And I love that. It's just a little nod and it's just a little bit of fun. And I love these two. And just kiss him. Go on. Fall in love. Go on. You're away from school. We won't tell anybody. What happens in Rome stays in Rome. I love these two. But Spooner coming in and going, we can have a bit of fun with this, having had those wonderful philosophical, thoughtful, educational Reithian foundations laid by his predecessor as script editor David Whittaker, who I do think is an important architect, a key architect of Doctor Who. Quoting Shakespeare here. Quoting Mark Antony and Julius Caesar, and then Barbara's response, "Oh boy, that was a mistake," is terribly funny. I mean, they get hammered, don't they? I love that. But I think it was one of Doctor Who's strokes of fortune, is that having gone from the very sensible and intelligent and children's literature fluent David Whittaker, we then go to the cheeky, funny, colourful, perhaps slightly more lightweight in terms of ambition. Now, so I've seen some people saying that that's Nick Evans, by the way, missing his scabbard. I've always read that as him pretending, practicing his stabbing moves. Because he's not a very experienced slave trader / killer, and that's him being sort of beefing himself up and going, this is how I'm going to stab people. It's only recently I saw somebody go, and he keeps going to do his scabbard and then misses. Well, because there's a planned close up right at the end of the scene, and he's supposed to do that then. So again, the more generous interpretation is often the correct one, I think. Now, look, I don't glorify in portrayals of drunkenness, because alcohol is a very serious business and can cause many people great problems. But I love this. I think it's very funny. And there are few examples of drunkenness in Doctor Who, and this is perhaps the greatest of them. There is one in Colony in Space that I like, where a few actors decide to liven up a scene by playing it slightly pissed, and then another scene a bit later hungover, which I'm sure I will talk about when I do Colony in Space. O tempora, o more. So Mores, he's now, having quoted Shakespeare, is now quoting Cicero. And I remember mentioning that to Christopher Barry and saying, did you feel the need to explain any of that when you're throwing in a bit of Latin into your children's tea time adventures? And he sort of basically went, kids were more educated in those days, which I had a lot of sympathy for. Is there such a thing? Did anyone do the classics these days? The stories are great, you see, and it's a fascinating language. I did Latin. I did Latin at O level, and I did very GCSE, and then I was going to do it for A level. And it was the same Latin teacher, although it was at a college up the road. And he basically said, you're only to do it if you're to take it seriously, Toby. And I was like, hang on, I got an A out. What? I remember the theatre studies teacher, when I told him that, said, don't do it because he's obviously marked your card already. You'll have a terrible time. So I did something else instead, but which is a shame. One teacher put you off doing a thing and change your course. I would have, because I like Latin, and I was all right at it. But it was good advice, I think, from the theatre studies teacher, Mr. Barge, who it was interesting to hear him to talk of another teacher like that. Just go, you shouldn't have done that, and you don't want to be doing that then. So I didn't. Although my future wife did. So I could have been, a mower matting her all that time, because there was only two of them ended up doing A-level Latin in the end. Anyway, why am I talking about that? Because he quoted Cicero, tempora o mores, which is a bit of Latin thrown in to early Doctor Who, the Romans, which we're watching, which is also, for all the, yes, it's appealing to educated children, has the farcical comedy stylings of Dennis Spooner, where they found a dead body in a hedge. I like this very simple road set, by the way, with enough lush greenery, and then the lighting here to make it night. It's simple, but it's effective. Striking looking actor here, Dennis Edwards, who, again, I remember there's a great picture of him and Ascaris as a full page picture in the Doctor Who The Early Years book, and it makes it look like he's a really important character, and that they're in a film, because a lot of those black and white design stills make some of this stuff look $1 million and like movie stills, and of course that's not what they are. And actually, I've recently watched this scene being giggled at by Bonnie Langford, who notices Dennis Edwards' helmet moves every time he talks, and I think it's in the Beyond the Sofa on the Blu-ray set. And they showed this clip at the BFI when the season 2 Blu-ray was launched, and Bonnie Langford's laughing at this hat moving up and down was infectious, and not normally the sort of thing I approve of. Going, you can ignore a hat moving up and down. Watch the scene. Watch the beauty of it. Watch the wonderful artistry of ancient television making. And of course, I need to get over myself, and absolutely did when Bonnie Langford's infectious hilarity at the wobbly helmet made that a very fun sequence, which is the only part of the Behind the Sofas I've seen. I haven't had a chance to watch any of the season 2 box set thus far, apart from the preview of the documentary that I made, just to make sure there was nothing in it I hated, and there was loads, and it was everything I was wearing and what I look like, and my hair and face and gait and posture, tone of voice, and everything I say and do. But other than that, I think it was pretty bloody marvellous. He gets lots of nice close-ups in this episode, I seem to recall, Dennis Edwards. And here's Edward Kelsey, who appears later in The Power of the Daleks and even later still in Creature from the Pit. All directed by Christopher Barry. He just plays slave trader here, where he spends, I think, most of his... He's, again, only in this episode. I think he has to do lots of baddie laughing acting, which is really hard to do, and I'm not sure he entirely gets away with it. But he's a great bushy-eyebrowed, prominently nosed actor who became famous in this country for playing Joe Grundy in the radio drama The Archers. And Joe Grundy was a farmer, and a great character, a sort of the Grundy family are sort of lovable ne'er-do-wells. He was a sort of lovable rogue, Joe Grundy, and he took over the part from Hayden Jones, who is Vosper in The Mind of Evil, and they were mates. And Hayden Jones died, but I think had recommended Kelsey to the production team, or recommended Kelsey be in The Archers, and then it turned up he inherited the part from his friend. Hayden Jones is also the Auton voice in Terror of the Autons. And Kelsey, who I corresponded with, who sent me a lovely letter when I did it's a piece I had in Doctor Who magazine where I had interviews with actors from Power of the Daleks, and it was Bernard Archard, Edward Kelsey and Robert James. And Edward Kelsey sent me a lovely, lovely letter. And what was I saying about that? And I informed him of his place in Doctor Who history, because by dint of him appearing in Power of the Daleks, he is the first credited guest actor to appear on screen with more than one leading Doctor Who, if you see what I mean. He's the first guest performer to appear with more than one Doctor. So there we have it. So well done, Edward Kelsey. He's big. I think he goes off laughing now as well, and I think you hear him laughing as he disappears. And of course, this is the setup, isn't it? So Ian and Barbara were together, having already split up from the Doctor and Vicky, and now and this was always something that hit home to me in early Doctor Who, was that the danger is as much from the geography. So the idea, Ian rather lamely goes, "I'll look for you in Rome." That's like I said, "I'll look for you in London." Do you know what I mean? It's massive. And they don't have any other sort of form of communication device and don't know the place. They're suddenly needles in different haystacks scattered all about. They may as well be scattered across the cosmos. And this is interesting because it looks like Dennis Edwards as the Centurion is going to become a sort of major player. We don't see him again. We see him as a corpse next week, but it ain't Dennis Edwards. But that's another story. So this is the final bit we get at him. He's got an excellent face and a lovely sneer, and he was a nice actor and was still around in the early 2000s. But I don't think anybody ever wrote or corresponded with him, which is a shame. I should have done. Barry Jackson we must talk about as well, because he has a series of nice connections with Doctor Who, but all connecting must cease now, because that's the end of the episode. I did have plenty to say. But part of the farce of them all being split up is also part of the danger, as with Marco Polo, of that idea that that you have to be close to the TARDIS, otherwise you're in desperate trouble in this era in Doctor Who, because the landscape and the worlds that you inhabit are big and sprawling, and the idea that you might get back to the TARDIS in ancient Rome, when modes of transport take days, weeks, years to get you back to where you left, and the fact is you don't have maps, iPhones, or all any of those sorts of things, means that just the simple act of taking you away from your haven and splitting you up is as potentially deadly and disastrous and dangerous as anything else. And that makes the whole sort of universe and landscape of Hartnell era Doctor Who in particular dangerous in and of itself before you introduce plot and character. And I'm always taken by that, because it almost seems like, God, everything seems so impossible. The stakes are so high. But of course, and I didn't mention, I was wittering on about something else. The wonderful bit where Barbara goes to hit Sevcheria over the head with the vase and misses and hits Ian, and he does a sort of comedy. There's a bit of comedy. William Russell enjoys doing his comedy, woozy acting, either drunk or semi-conscious. There's that odd bit where Didius holds his sort of head up, and there's a slightly too long close-up of poor old William Russell having to keep going, I'm doing woozy now. But I love the slightly tipsy, tottering, lazing about, it has been said elsewhere, potentially post-coitally lazing about that Ian and Barbara are doing in the in the villa. I do love that. I do love. I'm watching a program at the moment, a totally different program on the BBC called Happy Valley, and one of the things that is superb about it is that I believe every single relationship, and it's not just the obvious stuff like the sisters and all that sort of stuff, which is very, very well done indeed, and has had a lot of very painstaking attention paid to it. But it's things like a relationship with a boss as they're walking down the corridor and having a quick chat, and you go, there's so much history there because of what the actors are doing, because of the writing, but the writing is so economic as well. And I think anything that makes you believe that these people know each other outside of this scene, and that there's a weight of history that's unspoken, and yet some kind of alchemy between writing and performance and chemistry of actors means you go, I believe that these people were hanging about with each other 5 years ago, and that what we're seeing now is an accumulation of that timeline. I always think it's very, very impressive, because when it's good, you don't notice it. And then when you do sort of suddenly notice it, you go, oh, wow, that is good, because it's good when it doesn't draw attention itself. It just does it organically, and as I say, with kind of alchemy. And I love the comfortableness with which William Russell and Jacqueline Hill conduct themselves. And I don't think they're... And I remember saying to William Russell during one commentary, I'm sure, I said, and of course, didn't Ian and Barbara get together? And he sort of went, no. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, come on. I desperately wanted him to say yes, and he just knocked it down. He did that a few times in commentaries for me, where I tried to get him to go with me on something, and he just didn't. And not unkindly. I just don't think we were on the same wavelength, which is a real shame. But he, he's a legend. I love him, and I love her. I never got the chance to meet her, but I think, So I'm not sure that they're necessarily suggesting anything there, but I am more than happy to impose unutterable love between unutterable. No, because that means maybe unspoken love between Ian and Barbara that will eventually blossom. But the beauty is that it blossoms when we don't see it, because that would spoil it, that would sully it. You never... That's the problem with will they or won't they. When they do, and they will, it immediately spoils, because potential is always more exciting than actuality. The experience of traveling, hopefully, is actually more gratifying than the experience of arriving. And I don't want to see Ian and Barbara arrive together, not even at the same time. So Josh has given me a clue as well. Josh there said he's choosing a scene from part 1 and then dialogue from parts 2, 3, and 4. Now, do I try and therefore match Josh and see if I can win this one, or do I be true to myself and go, but what am I, what do I, because I'm, one of my favorite things about this story is Derek Francis as Nero, and that's not a scene or a piece of dialogue. Well, actually, I don't have to worry about that for the moment, because I think I think my favourite bit is the Ian and Barbara woozy from drink. Slave traders come in. Barbara hits Ian over the head with the vase. I love it, and that speaks to. And I can sort of slightly cheat, because that scene speaks to what I think makes The Romans what it is its bold embracing of comedy without actually undermining the adventure serial element of Doctor Who, without undermining its seriousness of intent. Because what is it the third Doctor says? Somebody says, "Are you serious about what I do?" Yes, not necessarily about how I do it. And just because something is funny and comedic, it doesn't mean its intent is not serious. It doesn't mean its message is not serious. Now, I'm not saying there's a message to the Romans, but it does have an educational element. The stuff that school children watching will have benefited from: a bit of Shakespeare, a bit of Cicero, Latin, but also just having it set in Roman times and having slave auctions and togas and those costumes and centurions, and the doctors chat about pipes, not having pipes but having aqueducts instead, so that you do have the educational remit of Doctor Who there, but not in a po-faced way. And again, something can be educational without being deadly serious. Now, there's nothing more embarrassing than a teacher trying to be wacky and funny, so I can understand those who might go, well, I prefer my history lessons to be a bit more sober, but I actually like my history lessons being a bit drunk in a villa. So I think, and I think because it's an important development, the Spooner voice, that means that Doctor Who, acquires and embraces that sort of comedic seam in its DNA, and it's Doctor Who's sense of humour has often been the saving of it. I don't agree that Doctor Who is good because it's bad. I don't agree that Doctor Who is good because it's aware of its own, it sends itself up. It's tongue in cheek. I don't believe that. I believe it can sometimes acknowledge its own stupidity, but not cynically, because it is a daft premise, but it embraces it lovingly. It revels in it, but without ever undermining the seriousness that has to accompany it in order for it to be an exciting and engaging drama. And the Romans goes as far into comedy as perhaps Doctor Who ever can, and yet it still has the serious adventuring stuff. And I think it balances that quite nicely. And I think that comedic voice, if Doctor Who hadn't had that, I don't think it would have lasted. A lot of our favourite moments of Doctor Who and what the character does is that being this eccentric alien allows the Doctor to have funny reactions and to sometimes be a bit clueless, but also equally to sometimes be, cunning, to outmaneuver us, to sometimes play the fool in order to disguise their great intelligence. So lots going on. The comedy of the Romans speaks to a lot about the whole of the DNA of Doctor Who. And I think I interrupted myself. I got a message from my friend Johnny Camden last night going, I thought the Romans were supposed to be a duffer. I'm watching it and I'm having a great time. And I went, no, I don't think. I said, I think some people don't, worry about the comedy angle of it. And it was funny. He was another one, and Josh alluded to this in the intro, who'd been led to believe that everybody thinks the Romans is a bit crap. And was delighted by how brilliant it is. But I think there's a bit more of an appetite, and I sense this from some of the younger fans as well, having gone to the BFI to watch the Time Meddler. It was great to see, and I read sometimes, and I see younger fans talking about Hartnell, and they love him, but they particularly love him when he's being funny and when he's being daft and when he's being dotty. And I think maybe I grew up in the shadow of Doctor Who be wanting to be taken very seriously, and I wanted Doctor Who to be very taken seriously, because if it wasn't taken seriously, it might be axed, or people might laugh at me or mock my love of it. So it was important that it wasn't a children's programme and that it was very serious. And of course now when I see people taking Doctor Who too seriously, I go, no, you're killing it. You're killing it with your desire for it to be so important and so serious, and for it to be commenting on everything every time. Every single line can't be a throwaway line. It has to be some kind of problematic issuing, or some reinforcement of something very moral. It's a fun and zany adventure at its best. And actually, that's when you can make the serious points, because you've won people over with charm and with humour, and which is why often the British sense of humour works so well with when it's working on both of those levels. But in order to do that, the fun has to be infectious first. And we're living in a time now, interestingly, where comedians I think it's not an unfair observation that some say a lot of comedians now want a round of applause for saying something on the button rather than being funny. And I think sometimes, there's some talk about where comedy is important, and comedy needs to not just be funny, it needs to be about something. I'm convinced by that argument. Yes, comedy, worthwhile comedy can be about something and can be making an important point, but you can go so far and go, well, you're doing all of that, but you've forgotten the first bit, which is the comedy bit, and making people laugh to lure them in, and then you've got them, and then you can do all the other stuff. Is not to be underestimated, and it's a balancing act. And the Romans, tips the balance in favour of comedy quite a lot. But there is still, it's not Blackadder. It's it still has quite a lot of all the stuff with Ian and Delos is played absolutely straight. And Nero is a larger than life character anyway. So whether he's meant to be funny or not, he was always going to be slightly oddball and OTT, even without this story's deliberate comic intent. So what I'm saying is comedy is important. It's also not easy. It's not to be underestimated, and it is a key element of this story and that scene that is entertaining in of itself, but then has resonance throughout the rest of the story, and of course, initiates the farcical element of all of our characters being split up and just missing each other, which will come into the fore in later episodes, and which is delightful. So it's the ripple is caused by not a pebble, but by a smashed vase over a science teacher's head. So I'm going to go for that scene in the villa, which has been slightly sneaky on me because Josh did say that they were going to choose a scene. So let's see if that's the right scene.
My favourite moment from the first episode is from the scene where Ian and Barbara are lounging about, and Barbara tricks Ian into going to the fridge to get something, and obviously there is no fridge. It's one of those moments that I love most in classic Doctor Who, especially the William Hartnell era, when they have those moments of quiet time where they can sit down and have a little chat, and there's something really magical about it. And you can just tell that everyone on set is just having a really good time. And when you can tell the actors are having a good time, the audience will have a good time.
Yes, I'd missed that with all my chatter. It is a great moment when she sends him to the fridge. But I did allude to that in the commentary, didn't I? That I do. It's totally counterintuitive. I do love the fact that this story starts with the idea that they haven't been having an adventure. It just makes it more believable to me. He says in a farce about Roman times, but it and the cliffhanger in between each story does suggest an overarching an adventure in time and space. It's not a series of adventures, it's an adventure in time and space, which is why one story leads to another in the whole adventure, i.e. the whole canon of Doctor Who is one big adventure. But so that's my love-hate relationship with the inter-story cliffhangers. I love them because they're an anomaly, they're different, they're a thing that was in the early series and stopped being a regular thing. We still get the occasional one throughout the show, but was a stylistic thing, as with the individual episode titles, that was phased out. So that also makes it a sort of winning part of the early development of the show that we see disappear, although never quite. And actually, some of those end of stories leading into the other stories carry on longer than we like to think sometimes, because I think again, collectively in our mind's eye it's phased out with the individual episode titles, but actually quite a lot of those Underwater Menace leads into Moonbase leads into Macroterra, and various other examples, Enemy into Web. So but Dominators into Mind Robber, so you think, oh yes, they phased those out with the episode. Oh no, actually they didn't. And we even get them, into End of Forge Doomsday, into Kinder, and there've been modern stories where there's been a sort of more continuous narrative as well. So even though I think of Doctor Who as a series of single adventures, it's not. It's a richer, continuous tapestry, and more starkly so in those early days, which was really interesting to find out as a fan going back. When I first started watching, going, oh my god, okay, I didn't realise that one adventure led into another. So that was part of the archaeology of enjoying Doctor Who. You find out a thing that wasn't actually as much part of the show when I grew up watching it as it had been in the history that I then went on to discover, and what a joy it is to uncover history. As Doctor Who's creators, they had a different kind of history in mind, envisions. But so yes, I like that, but I also take the point my friend made of going, but it's less believable if it's one piece of jeopardy after another. But this does both cleverly. It has the cliffhanger that leads into the story, that what makes you want to come back after watching the rescue, and then just goes, actually that was just don't worry about that. TARDIS fell off a cliff. They're fine. And they've been here for ages. And isn't this a bit more believable? And isn't this a bit more of a relaxing start, which we're then going to upset? We're going to lull them into a false sense of security. And that helps with the drama and the storytelling, but also means that we have those lovely moments. We love being with these guys, and because they're all so good. And I agree with Josh that we like watching actors have fun. It's not as simple as that, because if actors are having fun and forgetting that we'd like to have some too, that can seem a little bit self-indulgent and a little bit smug. But that isn't the case here. But again, it's not, when it's done well, it's sometimes worth pointing out that, we only like it because they're good at it, and that it's not guaranteed to be something we would enjoy watching unless it's done by deft, skilled and likeable people, which that quartet definitely is. I think I might be in a bit of trouble with Josh here. It would be nice if I. So I've got three bits of dialogue for episodes 2, 3, and 4, and then a scene for the overall thing. Well, I have a scene in this that I think is amazing, and also wrong, and funny, and also not a bit naughty, but we will get to that. I wonder if I can anticipate what Josh's bonus thing would be, which is a scene. Dialogue, I can't, and it's actually quite hard to do dialogue when I'm doing this, because obviously I'm talking over it. And in fact, I've just remembered there's that brilliant bit when when the Doctor's talking to Vicky after he's spoken to the. Oh, there's so many good bits of dialogue. I like it, when she says, I watch all the liars, isn't it? When when the Doctor is lying to the Centurion, that's great. And then when she goes, "You don't even know what your name is, do you?" And he goes, "Yes, my name is." And then the Centurion goes, "Maximus Battalion." And he goes, "Yeah, there we go." That comic interplay. So yes, amongst the farce and the physical comedy of smashed vases and hoisting people over your shoulders and all that wordplay in that scene between the Doctor and Vicky and the Centurion is cracking, is great. Lovely. So let's not forget that either. So there is going to be dialogue, but it's hard for me because I nearly did that whole commentary without mentioning those bits, which I love, because they register less when I'm chatterboxing throughout. But I have to chatterbox throughout because this is a commentary and you're not allowed to have clips or hear the episode. You have to have this witted monologue without and if I don't say anything, you just get silence. And whatever this is albeit only marginally, better than silence when it comes to a podcast. So anyway, I've got a tough task ahead of me to identify bits of dialogue from the next 3 episodes. But let's see what happens, because the road I'm travelling on is going to take me to episode 2 of The Romans. And as we know, all roads lead to Rome. Well, it's ancient Rome versus modern time travel, and it's ancient fan, Toby. Me meets modern fan, young Josh Snares, from over the other side of the world as well, but who's communicated worldwide brilliantly and inventively and pioneeringly in terms of internet usage and quality of filming and equipment and visual style, and also very engaging sort of personality and observations. I'm a big admirer of Josh, so very pleased that Josh, who you heard in the introduction there, has lent a bit of modernity to this fusty old codger here with his his microphone made of wattle and daub and his brain made of trilobites and antediluvian materials. Right. So anyway, yes, thanks to Josh, I've just spoken for 53 minutes on the trot about episode 1 of the Romans, having worried when it started that I wouldn't have many things to say about it. So I'm carrying on while I'm ahead. So I'm because sometimes I haven't actually done one of these where I've watched the whole story in one go in a while, because I kind of have to fit stuff in between stuff. But and I'd have to wait till the other half's asleep in order to fit in an episode or maybe two. But I don't feel like I've had a good run at anything. So this is quite fun. I'm enjoying this, even though it's only episode 2. All roads lead to Rome. So I would like you to take the same path as I through this story. It was January 1965. Well, I'm recording this in January 2023, and we're gonna start with episode 2 of the Romans. I've just remembered, of course, because the rescue is one of the few Doctor Who stories that begins on that has an episode on January the 2nd, which is my birthday. So so I'm recording this. In fact, I'm recording this when episode 2 of the rescue went out, but a few years later. So this episode is in 2 weeks' time from now, but what 58 years ago. Goodness me. So here we go. We are going to start episode 2, 58 years. That's extraordinary. And how would any of those people have even considered that somebody was born 9 years after this would then, 58 years after they were all convening at an army drill hall to rehearse something that they thought would go out once, would be poring over it on a giant screen. It's not a screen, it's a wall, projected onto a wall, in its 3rd physical release. I've had this on VHS and on DVD, and now I have it on Blu-ray. Oh, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary, and especially as it's a story that even within the sort of disposable, framework of Doctor Who as made then, this was a sort of funny, silly one as well. I don't think anyone thought they were making anything other than something that was a bit of a lark. But we all need a bit of a lark, and again, I've just done the Caves of Androzani, which is grim and dangerous and deadly, but works because it exists within the the multi-genre universe of Doctor Who. You wouldn't want all Doctor Who to be like the Caves of Androzani, but the fact that the Caves of Androzani is like the Caves of Androzani makes it so damn special. And you could say equally the same of the Romans. If all of Doctor Who was like the Romans, it would be annoying. It would be lightweight. It would be slightly irritating, I think. But because this exists, a couple of weeks after the Dalek invasion of Earth, which is a grim post-apocalyptic, resistance fighting, epic, and a few weeks before a psychedelic insectoid lunacy fest, and you know, everything that the eclecticism of Doctor Who, and yet it's all the same program. That's it's wonderful, one of its many wonderful elements. So yeah, I wouldn't want all Doctor Who to be like the Romans, but I like the fact that when I'm scanning my shelf, I'm going, what sort of Doctor Who am I in the mood for today? One day I will be in the mood for the Caves of Androzani, and another day I will be in the mood for the Romans, and both will satisfy me in totally different ways, and yet both will be recognisably Doctor Who. So let's see what I recognise as all roads lead to Rome, but currently lead to the countdown in 3, 2, 1 to press play on the second episode of the Romans, and here we are. So I think that might have started slightly late because I'd watched the beginning when I watched the previous one, but I don't think anybody seriously times these, and even if you tried, you couldn't, because there's always a bit of a delay. So I'm not going to fret over that, although the part of my it will be fizzing in the back of one of my synapses now, going, this isn't quite right, it'll be slightly out of sync, even though it's always slightly out of sync, and that's going to bother me probably till the day I die. But anyway, here is Barry Jackson, Drax in The Armageddon Factor. He's also Garvey in Mission to the Unknown and Galaxy 4, because he appears at the end of Galaxy 4 in the lead-in to Mission to the Unknown. Was also known in the business as a stuntman called Jack Barry. So it's not just he's not just been hired as an actor. He was quite an acrobatic stuntman and stunt arranger. Although later in life, didn't do the stunting because he was a very busy character actor. He's the guest lead, isn't he, in Blake Seven's Is It Mission to Destiny, which is the sort of murder mystery one, and a regular in Midsummer Murders as the pathologist. But there he is, out of the window and out of the story. He's quite a regular. He's throughout the story in the novel, which I remember being really annoyed about because it was the days before you could get stories on video. So the fact that Donald Cotton, who'd written brilliant novels of the Mythmakers and the Gunfighters, his own stories that I didn't really understand and now adore, had the audacity to write the Romans and to not fastidiously transcribe the script so that I could enjoy the story as broadcast. I've gone through this metamorphosis with many things. It's a bit like the animations, where it's just like they have to be as close to the original as possible. They're never going to be. They're animations. Cartoons do not look like live action. So actually, I've gone through a real journey of that, going, no, if you can take advantage of the animation medium to make this look more visually arresting, then do so. There's no point in tracing what could have been, quite flat, sort of landscapey, no camera cuts because of the small amount they were able to do, the limited canvas, and the books that are more valuable are the ones that tell the same story that we have on video in a different way, or a fresh way, or a reinterpreted way, or a more insightful way. But that's because, of course, we now have ready access to the videos. When I was furious about the novel of the Romans, we didn't have ready access. So what Donald Cotton was doing was betraying consecrated text. I also have a thing that has a resentment I've hung on to for over a decade, is that there's one of the fun bits of the commentary of this was when we decided to have Barry Jackson in at the beginning of episode 2, and then to fall out of the commentary when he gets thrown out of the window. Now I think is a funny idea, now we just keep him. In fact, I once did I did a commentary for Phantom Films where we, at the last minute, changed the episode of The Green Death we decided to have John Levine on the commentary for, and only when we got to the end of it did we realise he wasn't actually in that episode, but we still talked for the whole of it. You'd keep Barry in and he could talk about the general principles of TV at this time and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. But we had him fall out of the window, fall out of the commentary. So, of course, everybody else turns and he's going, well, bye-bye, Barry, bye-bye, nice to see you. And nobody's looking at the picture, and nature abhors a vacuum. And my job as moderator of the commentary is to, steer things. But I didn't want to stop everyone saying goodbye to Barry. So I said, and Barry Jackson's off there, but he will return to Doctor Who in Mission to the Unknown and the Armageddon Factor. And then I foolishly went on to Gallifrey Base, and I think sometime later, because I know that I'd helped this person who'd wanted to get some dates of when some of the commentaries were recorded, so I very helpfully filled in the ones that I knew because I'd been at them. And then I saw her criticising what I'd done here, because she said, well, there's a bit in the commentary of the Romans where he says when Barry Jackson returns Doctor Who, but none of those people in the room were in those stories, so that will have meant nothing to them. It's like, no, I wasn't saying it to prompt them. I was saying it because nobody else was paying attention to the commentary at that point apart from me, and I thought off the top of my head that would be a useful thing to throw in whilst their attention returns. And I don't know why I'm having to justify this. I didn't say any of this. Of course, it's been brewing in the back of my head ever since. And I don't want to be one of those, you don't want to be one of those people who writes an autobiography that's, where every chapter ends with, and naturally I had the last laugh, where lots of sort of petty grievances are cathartically exorcised through the moment of sort of, petty revenge or one-upmanship. But it just hit me that, God, you can't do anything with the outlook of a Doctor Who fan. Sometimes whatever you might do as somebody contributing to a Doctor Who product that isn't actually Doctor Who itself, whatever you do, people are gonna just assume the worst, or criticize you for whatever you've done, even if what you've done is they're never going to take the more reasonable interpretation of your action there, which was just, I was covering a silence and keeping it going and thinking off the top of my head, and I have that knowledge to be able to impart when nobody else is looking at the screen to cover the silence, and here we are back again. But no, that's not good enough. What was he thinking doing that? And you're like, oh, thanks a bunch. So that taught me never to go looking on Gallifrey base, but I never gave them any more dates, I'll tell you that for sure. But anyway, one of the first things I knew about the Romans was that Gerton Klauber, playing the Galley Master, recreated his Galley Master role from the Carry On film. And it was only when I was researching for the commentary that I did for this that I realised that I discovered that wasn't true. A thing that I'd assumed and known to be true because it was mentioned in Doctor Who: A Celebration was actually not true, because he's not the Galley Master, is he? He's I think he and Alf Garnett, Warren Mitchell are Marcus and Spensius. They sell things. That's the gag. But he is in Carry On, Cleo, Gerton Klauber. So his casting is perhaps an echo of that. And Gerton Klauber returns to Doctor Who in the Macra Terra as Ola, but of course I cannot mention that in good company, lest it be somehow taking away from some observation somebody else was going to make. This, as woman prisoner, is the wonderfully monikered Dorothy Rose Gribble, who I interviewed in her sort of elderly accommodation that she was at, which I think is where Downton Abbey is filmed. I could be wrong. But I'd written to her, and her nephew got in touch and said, well, you by all means come and visit when I'm visiting her. And so I went to see Dorothy Rose, who didn't have a huge career as a sort of television or theatre actress, but did do lots of poetry recitals and things like that, and was still sort of always doing stuff. And she was very sweet, and her Who's Round was released after she died, so she was a bit she wasn't she wasn't the most lucid, shall we say, interviewee, but she was delightful. And here's Michael Peake as Tavius, who, when I recorded the commentary for this, he was a mystery. It was do we know what became of him? He sort of stopped acting, not long after this, and Christopher Barry didn't know, and we've since discovered that he's one of the first actors to die from Doctor Who. There we are, folks. Oh, I didn't mention that about Bart Allison, who's Maximus Battalion. He's one of the few Doctor Who actors to have been born in the 19th century. He was born in 1890, and Michael Peake, who plays Tavius, and it's a lovely performance with those wonderful gravelly tones that he has, which suggests to me that why this next news is not perhaps a surprise, because he sounds like he's been smoking Bensius and Hedges as Eus. In ancient Rome, he's got a lovely smoker's tones there. That sounds like it's not good news for Dorothy Rose there. Dorothy Rose Gribble, what a wonderful name. Lovely lady. And I love the fact that, all those years later, I interviewed her in 2013, I think. So again, all those years later, there she was in an old people's home. Some weirdo comes and sits in a little room that she's got and talks to her about her remembering that she had a spot on her nose when she was in Doctor Who, and she couldn't really write and particularly well. So I've got this sort of spidery Dorothy Rose Gribble written in my early years book. And I brought a photo as well, but I printed it on some really overly shiny paper and used a sort of metallic pen, so it didn't. That autograph hasn't really survived, unfortunately. And this is great, isn't it? That I'm not commentating much on the action. Sorry, this is I remember the picture of this seeming. Again, in the early years, made these scenes seem not unlike the scenes one was used to from, Spartacus and things like that, where they were done on much bigger sets with much greater resources. But actually, they pull off the illusion here. There's a pleasing amount of extras, all bare-chested as well, and it's sort of pleasingly realistic and grim. And you could tell there's water in the studio, though. That's no mean feat. But you could tell there's kind of a couple of stagehands with buckets chucking water on. But I think that's effectively done as Doctor Who's version of a similar scene in Spartacus. Obviously compromised. Oh, now. Behind Doctor Who there, as he enters the marketplace with his back to us, the short lady is Francesca Bertarelli, who is one of the Coal Hill school pupils. So she is returning from the first ever episode of Doctor Who and the pilot. The school pupils were the same in both. And there she is. And apparently all the people at Corona Stage School, where she was from, fancied her. Fraser Hines fancied her. But then again, that's not a surprise. She was a lady and alive. And there she is. You can see her back to us there. She's sadly no longer with us now, but she had she did a Children's Film Foundation film, did bits and bobs of other stuff, did a bit of modelling. Was Phil Collins' sister-in-law, was a Playboy bunny. But you can find out all about Francesca Bertarelli if you've come to a commentary on the Romans to be led to discover things about its non-speaking background artists with their back to the camera, by listening to my Class of 63 Far Too Much Information, which tells you everything about all the school pupil extras in An Unearthly Child. Even the two men in the market are interesting. One of them is John Caesar, who plays lots of small roles in Doctor Who, sometimes uncredited, but he gets some decent speaking parts in things like the Sea Devils, and is also a Monoid 4, I think he is. And the other one is Ernest Jennings, who has a speaking part here, but then returns to Doctor Who only as an extra. And he's the guy in Mind Warp who he's an old rebel who they find and he dies. I think he's called Vern. He's got a name, and I think he has a little bit of dub dialogue over him, but he's not credited because it is an extras part. And Tuza goes, "Oh no, Vern he's the same age as me," and you go, "Oh God," because he's aged 9. Well, that was Ernest Jennings. I remember being thrilled to discover that an episode I'd seen, Mind Warp, had got an actor who was in The Romans, which was old Doctor Who that we can't touch and reach, and has people from ancient times in it. Although I was saddened that an actor who was credited and had a speaking part in The Romans was now doing non-speaking, non-credited extra work. But that's Those are my own little preoccupations. The Ian and Delos stuff is very different in the book because they hate each other in the book, and I think that's rather a shame because their friendship in this is rather nice, and I like the fact that they have this kind of bond. And Peter Diamond, who was a brilliant stuntman, and I think he's responsible for the sword fight in The Prince's Bride, which is one of the great movie sword fights, but he pops up in Doctor Who quite a lot in the early years. And he came and gave talks at the Ludlow Festival, as did Derek Ware. But I met Derek, another Doctor Who stuntman, but I never had the pleasure of meeting Peter, and he was still working when I think he had a stroke when he was driving back from the set of Heartbeat that he was still working on when he died. And I met his son recently, actually, Fraser, and couldn't answer a couple of queries that he had, which I felt bad about. But anyway, nice to make contact, and I think Fraser is still, holding the flame for his dad's legacy, and rightly too. A great contributor to Doctor Who, and to TV and film, still going when he died. It's a shame we didn't get a chance to talk to him about his work, because the stunt guys are always really interesting. But he's a stunt guy who's a decent actor, which is always a very useful combination when you're doing telly at this time, and why people like him and Derek Ware got a decent amount of work, because they could handle the acting as well as they could handle the stunts. But yeah, I like Ian and Delos' relationship in that, even though it is a sort of totally serious element of the story. Ian and Delos don't really get to have an awful lot of fun, and I suppose the story needs that, because Barbara's about to get into Farceville with the delightful Nero. Oh, and here's Michael Peake back again, who I interrupted myself. Michael Peake is he the third actor to die from Doctor Who, or maybe he's the fourth? Jack Cunningham, the jailer in the Reign of there's Jean Conroy from the Dalek Invasion of Earth, who actually dies before her episode goes out. So she, her appearance in Doctor Who is posthumous, which I remember discovering, and being quite moved by it, and then putting it on Facebook, and somebody was a dick about it. Stop harbouring these resentments, Toby. Somebody going, oh, that's just what was it? Asperger's pointlessness or something like that. I thought, no, it's not. It's really interesting. Anyway, but naturally, I had the last laugh. No, I didn't. It's just annoying. But anyway, this is my space. I do what I want now. And anyway, I wonder if John Caesar got cast because of his name. That's not John Caesar. That's Tony Lambden. I don't know anything about him. I should find something out about him, really. But yes, Michael Peake. I think it goes Jean Conroy, then Jack Cunningham, and then it might be Jack Bly who plays Gaptooth, and then Michael Peake, or the other way around, Gaptooth in The Smugglers. But Michael Peake dies in 67, 68, something like that. So that's why his acting career stops in the late 60s, because he did. So he's not long for this world, even now. In this, he's in the Gorgo with Patrick Troughton. I think they're both policemen in it. But he's got a great face and a nice presence, although he does do a bit of comedy stuff here, even though he's one of the more serious characters, because he's revealed to be a Christian, of course, at the end. But he's doing sort of sotto voce, glancing around suspiciously, acting here in order to do a kind of, this is the cross purposes, farcy stuff that we've got going on, where, Tavius thinks he's talking to Maximus Battalion and is sort of, tipping the wink and metaphorically tapping the nose, and Hartnell's, being totally credulous, and it's sort of comedic cross purposes. And here we have Nero, played by Derek Francis, friend of Jacqueline Hill, which is why he ended up doing it, not from nepotism, but from he was a highly regarded actor, who they were lucky and grateful to have, but Jacqueline Hill was a sort of entry point for them. Although I was interested to notice, because it's the sort of thing I find interesting, there's no star guest billing for Derek Francis in the Radio Times, and that is for other actors in this period. And sometimes character actors like Donald Morley and Keith Parton, John Ringham, who weren't names. So you'd think if they got a Radio Times billing, Derek Francis definitely would. Maybe there just wasn't space that week, or they decided not to do it. That stuff usually came as an edict from the production team, and maybe whoever was in charge was going, we aren't doing guest star billings at the moment. But Francis was definitely well known, and he's certainly he's the performance of the piece. He's the character of the piece in a story that has quite a lot of traffic. As I mentioned last week, only Derek Sidney is in all 4 episodes, aside from the 4 leads. I love this comedy of but it's the Emperor's New Harp, isn't it? It's everybody sucking up to the, because of course there's a threat of execution upon a whim. So the comedy comes from actually the dangerousness of the situation. That Nero not only has power, he's also potty, but dangerous, and prone to kill on a whim. And I love that business with the whatever that horrible piece of meat is that he's had a bite out of and now given to the doctor. And we shall come to Tigellinus, open brackets, cupbearer, close brackets, later. That's Brian Proudfoot at Nero's side. And yes, this whole Hartnell sniffing the leg. That's a bit like when Sylvester McCoy listens to the apple, isn't it? That's nice. And Tom Baker sniffs things, doesn't he? And then of course you've got David Tennant, sticking his finger in the jar of marmalade and licking the mahogany. Yeah, suddenly the doctors, I like the doctors sort of do those sort of animalistic sense stuff to suggest that there's intellect there, but there's also heightened other senses. I quite like that. But yeah, the whole thing of the doctor having painted himself into the corner of being the greatest harp player and the lyre player in the world, but he can't actually play the lyre, opens us up to some great comic potential. Whereas on the other side, you've got Ian and Delos, sort of slightly stuck and on the run, and they're at the held prisoner. And then Tavius, even though he's done that sort of oi oi, shh, come over here sort of acting with Hartnell there, is quite a serious character for much of it, and sort of Barbara's sort of safety net and confidant, and their relationship is rather touching. Maureen O'Brien is perfect for this stuff. She has such a sense of fun. She evokes sort of fun. And here is the dead centurion, but you don't want to be paying Dennis Edwards, who's been hired as an actor last week, to come back and play the same part a week later, because you'd have to pay him his actor's fee to do so. So those legs and knees belong to Vez Delahunt, who is one of the Thals in the Daleks, and he crops up later as a unit soldier in the Silurians as well. I think there's a confusion because his name is rendered differently. But I think worked out which Sylvester Delahunt he was, because Vez, it took me ages to work it out, is short for Sylvester. But he was generally a supporting artiste. The Thals really are supporting artists, but they do get a credit in episode 7 of the Daleks. That's not a great zoom it does in on poor old Dorothy Rose Gribble, who obviously has been chatting to Barbara and will then act as a conveyor of information from Barbara to Ian, because they've been held in the same prison. That's yes. So the episode ending is Ian catching sight of some stock footage of lions and having to look very serious, which shows the different dramatic styles within this particular story. That we've gone from the sort of high campery, if you like, of the very silly Nero. Although there is danger there. He's played comedically, but there's we're never far away from that suggestion that if you play this guy wrong, he'll it's curtains. I went off piste there quite a lot. So I think the idea that I might find a line of dialogue to tie in with what Josh likes, I think is I think is going to be impossible. So I'm just going to have to go my own path. Also, I think because Josh is going, what did I like about the Romans, rather than here are a series of grievances as a result of me doing commentaries about Doctor Who or discovering facts and conveying them into the great universe of Doctor Who that have not been greeted with in the way that I would like by occasionally one person, and so I will ignore all any nice stuff that I've received as a result of my travails and still fixate upon the phraseology of two individuals who responded in a way I don't like to what I've done, which is where madness lies, and which one must not do, and which I like to pride myself that I don't do, and I clearly do. But naturally, I had the last laugh, and the laugh, I think, is what it's all about. The towering over, I think, for me, the Romans is somebody who makes their debut in this episode, and it's Derek Francis as Nero. It's the best performance in the piece. He's the best character in the piece, and in a piece that is sort of tonally quite disparate, and and the comedy can't be in places, can't go too far, but it also means that the drama is never quite as dramatic as you necessarily want it to be because of the comedic backdrop. I think the consistency of what Derek Francis brings to the table with his very entertaining and very enjoyable performance as Nero is a real asset to a story that needs that colourfulness of performance amid because a lot of the comedy is physical and farcical, and that farce trademark of people missing each other, and miscommunication or cross communication or even missed proximity. You need something that's a kind of anchor for that, and that's Derek Francis as Nero, who is, I think, on balance, the best thing about the whole adventure, and he makes his debut there. And I do love that scene where the Doctor gets out of playing the liar, although he is playing the liar, but that brings us to what I think will be the best line of next week's installment, and I think Josh will probably choose one of the lines from that scene. But then again, I thought he'd probably choose the vase on the head, and he didn't. So I'll be true to me, and I will choose Derek Francis as Nero, because under ordinary circumstances, if Josh hadn't said what they were going to choose and the nature of what they were going to choose, I'd have got in early with Nero, because to me, I don't think you can list the best things in the Romans and not list Derek Francis as Nero. So if I hadn't had that knowledge of what Josh was going to say, I'd have done Francis. So I'll give him his dues. Derek Francis is my favourite thing about episode 2 of the Romans, whereas Josh is going to choose a line from this episode, which I think might be from that scene, but I could be wrong.
So for episode 2, I've chosen a line of dialogue, and it's very early on in the episode. It's during the first scene where William Hartnell is having a little battle, and the line is, "I tend to forget the delights and satisfaction of the arts, the gentle arts of fisticuffs." It's so much fun, and it's so silly, and I just love the idea of the First Doctor just absolutely railing on people, just constantly starting fights and talking about how he used to train a fighter, and it's just brilliant. And I'm waiting for the Big Finish audio spin-off of William Hartnell just absolutely throwing it. And you know what? Bring it back. Bring back this fighting Doctor. I want to see Jodie Whittaker punch the hell out of a sea devil or something. Just bring it back.
And actually, you see, because I was fixating upon the injustice of the misinterpretation of my smoothing out of the conversation as Barry Jackson exited the commentary meant I didn't talk about the gorgeous fight scene that Hartnell has with him, which is great fun, which is very silly, and which is rather delightful. And I love the word fisticuffs. That's great. And yes, it has that marvelous thing of, I often consider one of the great strengths of Doctor Who is that the Doctor is largely pacifistic, and doesn't kill except for when he does, and doesn't get involved in violence except for when he does. But that idea that the Doctor, that there's something, about the old-fashioned arts of combat, which somehow have a sort of sense of fun and honour about them, which is totally at odds with physical violence, but within certain genres or in certain times or in certain circumstances can be a thing that is evoked, and it's delightfully so there. Fits Hartnell like a glove. Seeing this bungling assassin in a scene that's not pulled off perfectly, it has to be said. I think the ambition of the scene is perhaps greater than its execution, which is it's still not why I didn't talk about it. I was fixating on a grudge like an idiot. It's great, and it's again sort of unlike anything that you'd have had really in the first year of Doctor Who, and is showing something different that Doctor Who can do within its format, that it does with a great sense of glee and a great sense of fun, and Hartnell embraces it. And yes, he embraces that idea that the Doctor enjoys engaging in the art of fisticuffs. Fisticuffs is a great word as well. So I wouldn't have chosen that anyway, but I might have actually, if I'd been doing this episode properly, chosen the fight scene at the beginning, because it is great fun, and poor old Barry Jackson, who actually doesn't end up doing that much. I remember thinking Ascaris must have been a really, really important character. He's gone, a minute and a half into episode 2, never to be seen again. But and what a career he had. Oh, bless him. Yeah, I could have chosen that, but instead I got distracted by cathartically enunciating something from the recesses of the resentment box in the back of my head, which is no way to be. So hopefully that has now flown like a mute assassin out of a window, never to be seen again. But I know there's lots of fun to be had in subsequent episodes of The Romans, so whatever happens, we haven't had the last laugh. Well, hello everybody. I'm about to let you in on a conspiracy, which is the title of episode 3 of The Romans. I'm in two minds about this. Josh Snares, who you heard introducing their choice of story to conjure for happy times and places, has let me know that they chose a scene for episode 1, lines of dialogue for episodes 2, 3 and 4, and a scene for their overall thing. And I chose Derek Francis as Nero last week just because I wanted to acknowledge him. But should I take this seriously? There's still a chance if I get this week's line, next week's line, and the scene, which I have an inkling of what it might be, but I could be totally wrong. Just because I like the scene, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an obvious standout. And it's in this episode, so I will be talking about it. Do I go for that, or do I do my, sort of anal mind thing of going, no, I have to make sure the things that I want to acknowledge get acknowledged, otherwise they will not be etched in history, which I'm aware is ridiculous. But anyway, let's see. The description on BritBox says, Popea plans to poison Barbara, who has become the object of Nero's affections. Yes, indeed. So there's a lot to digest here, but try not to do it with the poison that's being thrown about as we eavesdrop on a conspiracy in 3, 2, 1. So here we are. It's quite a long episode, this one. It's over the 25. It's 26 minutes and a little bit long. So one of the longer episodes of Doctor Who. And I remember being daunted by that, because I think for the commentary we'd had Nick Evans and Barry Jackson in part 1, and then we lost Nick at the end of part 1, and then we lost Barry just into part 2, and then episode 3. So I'd already done a couple of episodes. It was just Ray Cusick, Christopher Barry, and William Russell remaining. I'd got fewer people for the longer track, but what's a minute and a half amongst friends. So yes, that's the stock footage of the lions, and here we are now in the. So I like this opening shot. I'm presuming that BBC had lots of these sort of pillars and things, to call upon. That's the great thing when you have a that's very funny. Poor old Tigellinus, who I adore. We will talk about Tigellinus. Well, when you have a corporation that has, places to store scenery and the ability to reuse stuff, it's a great use of the nation's artistic resources. And now that the BBC is not a programme maker really anymore and doesn't have that infrastructure, I think we lose out. I think we also lose out on the fact that you had, artisans, you had makers, you had designers, you had people under contract who learnt their trade, and through that learning and education poured that back into the artistic endeavour and output of the country. And even if people then left the corporation, they went into movies, and that's why we've punched above our weight in terms of television and movie production over quite a long period of time. So I'm sad we don't have that infrastructure. We still make great telly and great movies, but I certainly think it was no accident that having a program making hub that had resources that could be marshaled and could be used economically, because the cost was amortized over years and different productions and blah blah blah, is a helpful thing, which is why the BBC has always been sort of renowned for being very good at costume drama, because it had such a history and experience and resources to pull them off. And of course Doctor Who decides to go, well, we'll do a costume drama and we'll be daft. Look at the perspective in that corridor. It's obviously not that long, but it's a cheat with a little bit of stuff at the end. So there's lots to talk about here. Derek Francis is great. Tigellinus, I think he's credited in this episode. He's just Tigellinus last episode, but I'm sure... Oh, boom! I saw a boom come into shot. I'm sure he's credited as Tigellinus, open brackets, cupbearer, close brackets. He is played by Brian Proudfoot, who is, I think, giving a wonderful comic turn here. And it's his only credit in Doctor Who, even though he returns in The Chase, where his paperwork credit is Walk On Iridian, i.e. he's an Iridian. I think he gets exterminated, who has no dialogue or anything like that, but he's killed, but he's a non-speaking supporting artiste. And he's also, more important than that, he is Doctor Who. He is the first person, I think, to double for William Hartnell. He is the guy that wanders through the poplar trees and across the fields in the Reign of Terror for those filmed sequences to show the Doctor travelling through France when William Hartnell was not going to go all the way onto location to achieve those. So Brian is the first person to play Doctor who isn't the actor playing Doctor Who. I'm pretty certain there's nobody else in any other episodes prior to that. No, that's right. And here we have Tavius having Barbara. I was very pleased to see in the BBC's internal report that Jacqueline Hill's performance was complimented by Kenneth Adam, big BBC boss guy, for episode 2, because she is excellent. Of course, part of this thing is I see Ian and Barbara as kind of mum and dad a bit. They were the older companions. They were companions before I was born. And of course, Jacqueline Hill here is younger than I am now, but I still look at her, and she's beautiful, and I'm not saying she looks older than she actually is, because she doesn't. But she will always be older to me, because Barbara is older than me, and considerably older than me in terms of, when you're a youngster watching these programs, most of the companions are a bit closer to your age. But, Ian and Barbara were grown-ups. They were teachers as well. So I will never, even though this woman I'm looking at is, 14 years, probably 14 years, younger than I am now, she's still a maternal figure to me. That she's stunningly beautiful. I think she's an excellent actress. I love Jacqueline Hill. I never had the pleasure. I have been to the house that she lived in when she was doing Doctor Who, because her husband Alvin Rakoff still lives there, and I had the pleasure of visiting him a few short years ago. Beautiful house that they have. And she was, of course, lived near the Bryerses. She was best mates with Richard Bryers' wife, Anne Davis, who passed away this year, sadly, last year just gone. Now, this gets very silly now, the Romans, and I love it. I mean, you know, the serious mind, I have heard people going, oh, yeah, but he's trying to sexually assault Barbara. There's nothing funny about that. I mean, it's obviously ridiculous. I don't think it's trying to make light of sexual assault. It's a farce. It's a form of comedy. Sexual assault is something I take very seriously and would always roundly condemn, but also think in a ridiculous, heightened situation, just in the same way as you can be funny about death, as we will be later on. I think death is a terrible tragedy. I take it very seriously. I write obituaries. I don't have a sense of humour. You know, when somebody dies, I'm not one of those people to make jokes about it. I think that's quite disrespectful. But you can still have a funny death scene if you're in a heightened, farcical construct. But yes, you could equally be very serious if you want to go, but actually making light of sexual assault is actually very bad. And you go, yes, it is, but context is all. And I don't think anything that happens here would in any way increase the likelihood of sexual assault on anybody. But then again, I'm not somebody that's ever been sexually assaulted. There might be people watching this who've had a bad experience who might be triggered by it. So who am I to comment? It's a very tricky area. But I am able to, you know, leave any real world concerns I may have about such things at the door and go, this is daft and silly, and we're not supposed to take the sexual assault element of it seriously, as ridiculous as that sounds. So I'm not sure I've convinced myself. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. This is Antirad. It's the Seeker. It's the Seeker from the Rebos operation. Oh, that's a lovely little, very simple effect, but it's great fun. Maureen O'Brien is absolutely reveling in the kind of funny looks and double takes and all of that. She's great at this. That is a great set, that perspective set. It's really well done. I mean, he's such a loon. And Tigellinus is so annoying. So Brian Proudfoot, he is sad. For ages, there seemed to be no trace of him. He is dead, I think. He was a South African. I've actually found a portrait of him, a painted portrait of him that was for sale. Yes, we sadly we never got to touch base with him and find out his story. So he's a name, and we have a face because he appears in these two episodes. But there's not much known about the first pretend Doctor, whereas of course William Hartnell we know an awful lot about. But I do enjoy this. I mean, this is just sort of it's daft, isn't it? Maximus, go away. That is very funny. And Popea, of course, is Kay Patrick, who has directed many an episode of Coronation Street. She's a highly regarded director of Coronation Street, who took her final bow on the set with the death of the very popular character Hayley. She directed that very key episode because she's a director that was very much liked by the actors, and an actor's director. It's a phrase we know if we're Doctor Who fans that we've heard certain people described as. But she's also a favourite actress of Christopher Barry. I mean, there's nothing quite like this in Doctor Who. This high farce, ridiculous, and they're all playing it very well. Kay is wonderful. She lives not far from here. She has sat on the sofa I'm sitting on now. She's been here for supper. She was a good friend of Christopher Barry, who casts her again in The Savages. And in fact, she gave me her scripts from The Savages and a couple of pictures. Is that Bill Burridge in the background? Is that Mr. Oak? I'll have to look at my notes. It looks like he might be. Not Mr. Oak, Mr. Quill. Now, is this the gladiatorial arena? There's some not great sword fights in this. Good stuntman and fighter ranger though Peter Diamond was, and Doctor Who's budget really shows at the gladiatorial arena, doesn't it? So there's Dorothy Rose Gribble. She said that was the screen grab I got her to sign on that shiny photo with the metallic pen that just faded. Yeah, bless her. And I'm sure she said she'd got a pimple on her nose. She was very self-conscious about filming this episode. It's amazing the things you'd remember after 50 years. Do you remember any of your colleagues? Not really, but I remember being a bit self-conscious about my nose. That's exactly how I would be. He's got a little bit of stubble there, hasn't he? He's rather sexy, isn't he, William Russell? And the stubble becomes him. It's a great look for Ian, this hot Roman prisoner thing. And I say, this is whose legs are these? What is this? I don't remember this bit. Have I suddenly gone to a Red Hot channel? Oh no, okay. So they were direct front. Is that the closest close up we've ever had of a man's legs, naked legs in Doctor Who? Oh dear, poor old Nero. You see, that's basically, we're going to see a man. He's threatening a man with a sword. And in Roman times we know that threat of death was imminent. But it's ridiculous. He's yes, there is danger in this episode of Doctor Who because it is a drama. But look, I've said my piece. There's quite a lot of male flesh on display in this episode. Hartnell with just a towel over his shoulders. This is like Doctor Who After Dark. It's like those episodes of Hollyoaks, which were late night. Well, I don't know if you remember that. It was late night Hollyoaks, which was like normal Hollyoaks but with bottoms and showers. So I love the way that the Doctor sort of manipulates Nero. There's a sort of joyousness in the comedy First Doctor, who has an awful lot of fun playing the fool. Sorry. He plays Nero like an instrument. Actually, he manipulates him in order to outwit him. But there's great fun to be had in all of the Doctor's intelligence. It's a pesky intelligence. And Vicky hiding under a table. I love that. There's lots of hiding under tables and beds and behind curtains. I mean, it's blatant in what it's trying to do here. It's as daft as a brush. And so yeah, Kate. Here's Kay. Kay Patrick. Oh, she's just gone again. As Popea, who had a good acting career, but then went on to be a television director, and is a lovely lady. And she's written a novel relatively recently. But she's a good egg, and there's a little part of me that goes, oh, somebody from Doctor Who's been at my house, which I rather like. But she was supposed to be on the commentary. I was supposed to have met her much, much earlier because she was supposed to be on the commentary for this. But she was run over by a unit car on the set of Coronation Street. It made the papers and everything, and she was quite badly injured. She needed, I think, a knee rebuilding and a pin put in somewhere because, a unit car rather carelessly backed into her. So we didn't have her on the commentary. Which was rather I mean, obviously it was a bigger shame. She's beautiful, isn't she, as well? It's it's more of a shame that she got hit by a car than she wasn't on the Romans commentary. But nonetheless, I love the rapport that the Doctor and Vicky have. She's got a real enthusiasm and engagement that is rather infectious and makes you enjoy the adventure. And he's clearly having a whale of a time hooting his way through the frivolity. And Jacqueline Hill is doing what good comedy requires, which is somebody to sort of soak up all the ridiculousness, and she is playing the laughs, but she's not mugging, because you can't have everybody doing the same thing, otherwise it becomes a sort of cacophony of applause seekers. So she needs to sort of maintain a certain bit of dignity and composure. The Tigellinus stuff, they're giving because we've got the poison chalice as well. So we have the that's the other part of this episode. You've not only got the sort of farcical chasing and the people missing each other. You've got the old staple of exchanging goblets and poison, and of course the hilarity of that is that some poor wretch loses their life. And so we have a very unusual thing for Doctor Who. We have a comedy death, and as I say, I don't really like, humour that is that takes death lightly. Because I don't know, I'm obsessed with the Grim Reaper. I don't know why it is, and I like reverence. I like paying homage to people that have passed on, and to mark that occasion with dignity and with reverence. But also, I like a good joke, and a good joke is a good joke is a positive thing. Most people who are trying to make you laugh are trying to, generally laughter improves your day. Having a sense of humour about things, disarms the deadly, the dangerous, the upsetting, and sort of makes us what we are, having a sense of humour. And look, great comedy look there, Brian Proudfoot. Great comedy death, great reaction, horrible reaction from Nero that he was right. But I love the look that Brian Proudfoot gives before he expires. It goes against all my instincts that to have a comedy death anywhere, certainly to have a comedy death in Doctor Who, and yet despite the fact it goes all against my instincts and my tastes, it's so well done that I absolutely love it to pieces. We allow things to happen. I don't know. I think I allow things. I accept things that might go against what I would normally go for, if within the context of what they're doing and in their execution they are, consistent and good. And I think that is. I think it's a lovely piece of acting from Brian Proudfoot. It's a very wittily done scene. Even though in real life I would find that to tasteless, but it's not real life. It's a silly episode of Doctor Who. Derek Francis getting to eat. I'm not sure that's not a way to eat grapes, really. I mean, I know he's showing that Nero is a glutton, but I wouldn't want to eat grapes like that. You'd get the stalks in your gob. So we've had the comedy death, which you see would be my. Now I don't know if that's going to be Josh's scene for the whole of the story, because it is a great scene. But it's a moment, really, more than a scene, isn't it? But it's certainly not a piece of dialogue unless he goes, "Oh, he was right." But no, because that's the dialogue is within the context. It's not the dialogue that what makes that work. It's what the dialogue is a response to. So what is the line of dialogue that Josh is after? But this recreation of Rome, it's because I studied Latin when I was younger, but I wasn't used to seeing Rome being a sort of. I don't know if you saw the mini-series Rome that it wasn't really a mini-series that was on 10, 15 years ago, which really showed that that strange sort of juxtaposition between what an artistic and intelligent society Rome was, and the bloody and sadistic and horrible side of it as well. And it is a fascinating culture in so many ways, that they were so advanced, such an advanced civilization, and yet one capable of such cruelty and casualness about death and all sorts of other things. Whereas I don't think when I was sort of growing up learning about the Romans I suppose we knew about the gladiators. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing, isn't it, that you would watch for entertainment, but it's not just out of context killing. It's it's like watching a live play battle scene, but actually the actors in it die. I mean, that's quite extraordinary. What a strange civilization that happened. That was actual people. Long ago now, we can't touch or connect or anything, but it was but isn't this maybe this is the scene that he loves, the Emperor's New Lyre, where, and I mean, this speaks to so much about, I mean, it's a joke, it's just a gag about the doctor has decided to outwit Nero by going, only the most attuned ear could pick this up, which is a clever move from our leading man. He's all right, but he's not that good. Ha ha ha! That's going to be the line, isn't it? That's going to be the line. But then, of course, because Nero is going for it, everybody else, what is it Shakespeare says, this common body like to a vagabond floundering upon the stream, goes to and forth, rotting itself with motion. And it's it's about how people are sort of very easily led and change their minds, and how malleable that we are, and how, with a little bit of a sniff of somebody else's power or everybody else in the room. I've listened to some really interesting podcasts by, is it part of the Malcolm Gladwell series? Or is it one of the other ones? But anyway, there's this podcast about things that we do wrong as groups and avoidable mistakes. And there was one about how if you're in a waiting room and smoke starts coming from under the door, if one person goes, oh, bloomin' hell, and leaves, everybody is likely to leave. But if nobody leaves, nobody leaves. And it's that we will only do a thing. And that there's this story in this podcast, which I will look up after this, about a fire that started in a famous American restaurant building, and they could smell the smoke and they could hear the burning, but because nobody said, look, this is happening, we all need to leave, everybody stayed there, because the urge to not embarrass yourself and leave if it's not a fire is greater than the urge to save yourself by leaving in case there's a fire, which is extraordinary and speaks to our sort of group mentality. And of course, so I think we all understand that thing of going, the reason we laugh at those people in that scene with Nero is because also you kind of sort of go, but would you be the one to go, but I can't hear anything? Because you wouldn't want to be the one to... We don't want to be the one that stands out. And actually, there is a science behind it, and it's because if you stand out within a tribe or within an animal group or whatever, that makes you more noticeable and therefore more likely to be picked off. Whereas you actually want to, not stand out and actually be part of a group, because as a group you are stronger in the wild than as an individual. So it's all very, very complex and about emotional drivers and instincts and all of that. So look, here we've got Sev Chiria here now, who's kind of now suddenly got Nero's ear, and it means that which is why Derek Sidney has this sort of having gone from the guy that was selling the slaves, is he's now sort of organising what they do even in the gladiatorial, can I call it an arena? It's not really an arena, although it's not bad from that angle when you see the sort of the wings, as it were, of the arena. But the arena itself, if this were a feature film, they would be well up high, and there would be they would be in they would be in some sort of amphitheater, wouldn't they? Whereas this is much more like his own private cinema. Yeah, this is his. it's quite a rough fight, that, actually. Oh, yeah. Hang on, that they were really going at that hammer and tongs. So I think I've been unjust about the fights in the Romans when I was seeing those two gladiators practice, because that, for a studio fight, having recently seen the Time Meddler on the big screen, that battle was well done. It was at a good speed. Yeah, really well done. And that's a great cliffhanger. Next episode, Inferno, but not that one. So that, that was a mixture of, some quite high comedy. Loved that fight at the end. I'd forgotten how good that was. Tigellinus cupbearer, Brian Proudfoot, bless him. And Tirade the Seeker, I think she's only in that episode, Lacusta. But I like all the poisoner stuff. That's all quite fun. And again, it's quite bleak, isn't it? But it's yeah. Let's not go into a treatise on what's except I don't know. Anyway, comedy is more complicated than we give it credit for sometimes. My feeling tends to be, though, that most people who try to make you laugh are just trying to make you laugh. And I know we live in the shadow of some very unkind comedy and very cruel comedy, and racist and sexist comedy does nobody any good, really. But I think daftness buys you some leeway. Anyway, does me. I enjoy what the Romans does. It's silly and it's farcical, and it's taking a society that could be depicted. It could be quite grim with all the death and abuse that goes on in Rome, and they managed to turn it into the House of Ray Cooney. So listen, do I try and guess Josh's favourite thing? Yes, I think his line will be, he's not that good. I think that will be Josh's line. Were I not playing by Josh's rules, because I can do this, you see, I can say I can invoke what I would have chosen had I not known it's a line. That's what I should have done last week. But anyway, it doesn't matter. My favourite bit of that episode is the death of Tigellinus, which I think is hilarious and wrong and brilliant and very well done. And God bless you, Brian Proudfoot. I wish somebody had been able to chat to you about your place in Doctor Who history. But I still hold out a hope that might be the scene that Josh chooses for his overall thing, although it might be the liar playing, and I do love that as well. I love that comedy of holding a mirror up to foolishness, and even though it's set in Rome, it feels quite British, that, doesn't it? That everybody sort of goes, oh yes, this is absolutely fine, isn't it? Yeah, because the boss says so. But maybe actually it's not. Maybe that is a human truth. Haha. I love that scene. That's very, very, very funny. I love that all the regulars, apart from William Russell, are having fun, and what William Russell is doing is being all serious and unkempt, but in a kind of sexy way. But I love what Maureen O'Brien's doing. I love what Jacqueline Hill is doing. I love what William Hartnell is doing. It looks good. Some of the sets are very nice. Yeah, the private arena, the sort of this it's like he's sort of got sand in his living. He's just got a little living room that he's put some sand in out the back. He's like his conservatory, isn't it? Here's my gladiatorial conservatory. But the sword fight was really good there, so that was better than I'd remembered. Because the bit where those two guys are practicing looks a bit anemic. So I'm gonna try and play Josh at his own game and go, he's chosen the line, he's not that good, with asterisk, open brackets. But my favourite bit is the Tigellinus poisoning, although I also, with honourable mention to the farcical elements of the show, the performances of our regulars, certainly the 3 comic performances of our regulars, William Hartnell, Maureen O'Brien and Jacqueline Hill, and also a nod to the scene where the Doctor doesn't play a sound and everybody goes along with it, including pompous old Nero. Although I'd forgotten just how much flesh was on display. I'd forgotten actually all about that scene in the sauna, which is quite unusual, and certainly the close-up of Derek Francis's toes and leg and all up his, as I say, Nero after dark. But anyway, so I'm choosing the line, "He's not that good," or whatever it was that Nero says. Let's see what wonderful Doctor Who commentator, video maker, reviewer Josh Snares says about episode 3.
For episode 3, I have once again chosen a piece of dialogue. This one is filled to the brim of great quotes, but I had to nail it down to just one specific line, and it's a line by Nero, which is, "He's all right, but he's not all that good," which is during the scene where the Doctor is playing the lyre, and it's so funny. It's really great to see William Hartnell going for his more comedic talents, because he had a lot of experience in comedy and you could tell when you're watching the story as well. And my favourite stories are always the ones where he gets to be a bit more funny, such as the Gunfighters and so many more.
Yes, so hang on. Now I'm playing Josh at their own game. Suddenly things are looking up for Haydock. And of course, in choosing that line, it does then open up acknowledgement of other properties of the episode that are strong, like Hartnell's comic performance and indeed the scene that contains and breeds that line. So I can see what Josh is doing here, and I'm feeling even more foolish for choosing Nero last week. Anyway, you can't change the past, Toby. Well, you can if you rewrite it as a farce. Ha ha ha. So look, I'm suddenly I've gone from being whitewashed to now it's 2-1. So I could even it up next week and then go for the win with the bonus thing. So it's all to play for, and I will see if I can set alight my winning streak with an inferno next time. Welcome back, everybody, to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Haydock, and the first voice you heard after the music subsided was Josh Snares, YouTuber. I still feel like when I say YouTuber, it's like hearing some Victorian fusspot of old going, "The Beatles," or and what is this pop music of which you speak? Which is odd, because I've spent many a time watching excellent Doctor Who related YouTube videos by Josh, by Gavin Rymel, and the Dalek Collectives, and all sorts of other people. There's lots of great Doctor Who stuff out there, and Josh is one of the very first who caught my attention, and the very great pleasure of occasionally corresponding, and what a lovely person and what an enthusiast, and so very nice to be able to be in the orbit of the younger generation who don't sort of see me as some sort of has-been on the shelf, and actually, isn't it a joy that there's a high percentage of people who are very young who like this old black and white stuff. Now, yeah, obviously this black and white stuff was before I was born as well, but it wasn't that long ago, and I got used to it fairly on it, because black and white stuff, they don't even show black and white films on terrestrial telly really anymore, do they? I remember getting furious with the top 10 TV sci-fi, which was a thing they did on Channel 4. They did lots of top 10 things at this point, and it was an excuse for a comedian, and you think, oh, they'll get a sci-fi as a sci-fi sympathetic comedian. Oh no, Jimmy Carr. Okay, because he was the comedian they wanted to promote. That's how it works. I suspect if tomorrow they did a Talking Heads documentary about Doctor Who and they wanted 10 comedians on it, I wouldn't be on the list. Do you know what I mean? That's not how it was. Knowing about Doctor Who and loving Doctor Who is not important when it comes to choosing comedians for your thing. It's not even anyway, let's not get into that. But why am I saying this? Because when they did the top 10 sci-fi, I was furious that Quatermass wasn't on it, and I mentioned this to a friend, and he said, "Oh yeah, I looked into that, and it's because they didn't want too much black and white on there." It's like, oh, but okay, so it's not the top 10 TV sci-fi. He said, "Well, what made you think it was official? Do you know what I mean? It's just a program. It's just a." I was like, "Yeah, but if you're going to do a program, you should do it properly," which is why perhaps I've never really prospered in television. Anyway. I'm having a right old time doing these podcasts because you do what you want, and if people like it, they come, and enough of you have. So thank you for so doing. Let's get down and dirty in ancient Rome, which is a scary place to be, and see what the Doctor and co are getting up to independently of each other, which is part of the wheeze of. Part of the wheeze of the whole story. So we're on episode 4. Josh is going to choose a line, and I actually got the line last time, and a scene. So I'm slightly prescriptive in what I will be choosing. I ignored the rules in episode 2 and immediately regretted it, and then played by them in episode 3, got it right. So it's currently 2-1 to Josh. So I could statistically still win, but I've probably got about as much chance, seeing as the broad canvas that I'm having to look over, I've got as much chance as Ian and Barbara have of bumping in to the Doctor and Vicky in Nero's temple. So let's in Nero's, in Rome. So let's press play in 3, 2, 1. Burn, baby, burn. It's a Latin inferno. It's episode 4 of The Romans, which, yes, as I say, was the first, one of the first 2 stories, because I did them together, The Rescues and The Romans, that I got to do a DVD commentary on for. At that time, it seemed like it might be, a one-off. Who knew? And actually, what a heady time that was, because I got up early to do the recording, got the train at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to the BBC to record the commentary with Ray Cusick, Christopher Barry, Barry Jackson, all no longer with us, William Russell. There he is. And then Mossate My Doctor Who scarf started at the West End that night. And then that night I went to bed, and the radio version of Mossate My Doctor Who scarf got announced as on the list for Sony nominees. So that was possibly the best day of my life. As ever, I failed to capitalise. I mean, I did try. I wrote to people and hawked the news about, but I failed to capitalise on any of that. Well, apart from, I suppose, the fact that I did enough on that commentary to still be doing them, and I'm very grateful. I love the fact that I've sat amongst a number of these people. Well, actually, not these people, only this one. Lovely William Russell, brilliant Ian Chesterton, because sadly, by the time we got to do the commentary, all of these other people were no longer with us. Derek Sidney, Derek Francis. Derek Francis, who steals the show. He definitely does, as Nero. He has fun, but he's still very dangerous. I mean, the script helps him because he dispenses death so casually. But I like the way he doesn't necessarily sort of relish it. He does it with a sort of casual, he dispenses death with a sort of casual glibness that sometimes goes against the lines, which I rather like. It's actually a little bit more frightening. If you fail, you die. He does, he does quite matter-of-factly, which is in a way more frightening than, relishing it. He's not a sadist. He doesn't really feel it in a way. And then that's pretty grim. That poor soldier, And Jacqueline Hill's reaction is excellent. Look at her; she's such a good actress. And he, he's a bit, he's quite frightening there because he's so casual about it. So although it's a terribly funny performance and it's the show-stealing part and it's written brilliantly, it doesn't. I'd forgotten actually how dangerous this Rome is, because I think of the Romans as the farce, but they've used the advantage of telling the story at this bloody time in history, at this bloody place where life is cheap, and violence is meted out and used for entertainment and all sorts. Michael Peake, bless him. I double checked. He is the third person to die from Doctor Who. He dies 2 years after this. 48, so I've just outlived him because I've just turned 49. It's terrifying, isn't it? So, yes, it's Gene Conroy from the Dalek Invasion of Earth, then Jack Cunningham from the Reign of Terror, and then Michael Peake, at the order of actors from Doctor Who to die. Does anybody care for such information? Well, it's the kind of information I dispense. This is what you came here for, folks. And he's a lovely character. But again, I sort of think of him as quite a serious character in this, but he does have his comic moments. But yeah, he comes good here. He becomes the hero, and he's very distinctive looking. That bald head of his is, I think, very useful as an actor. And he's got a really interesting face, actually, because it can be... It's got a sort of gentleness about it, and a kind of, it has a sort of benign gentleness about it, but you can see him also probably being able to play villains equally effectively as well with that physiognomy, and certainly the bald head. And this is nice because it drips this in. I have my own reason for helping. He doesn't explain what that is, and they don't make a big deal of it. It gets a lovely close-up when it happens, but it lets that element speak for itself, that he is a Christian, and therefore, and that's, I think, quite thought-provoking, that at this time that was a sort of shorthand for good guy, which of course gets much more complicated. And I think ironically, and I feel sorry for people who are Christians now, because it's quite hard now to have Christians as a good guy, because I think of there's a desire now to to topple what people see as sort of untouchable institutions, and the church is always seen as because the church has had many, many, many problems over the years. But I am in sympathy with Christian commentators and friends of mine who go, it would be nice if a Christian in something did not turn out to be a pervert or a baddie or a liar or a hypocrite, because of course it's more dramatic if somebody who espouses Christianity is shown to be hypocritical, because that is more of a sort of the drama of what they espouse compared to the what they do. It makes for that's the stuff of drama, and that's the stuff of contrast, and hypocrisy, and going against the morality that you preach and all that sort of thing. But I think sometimes it would almost be the twist in a modern drama if the Christian turned out to be the good guy. But that's because the pendulum swings, and there's all sorts of different and interesting reasons why that is the case. But you note here that they don't go to much effort to explain the reason that Tavius is generally a force for good in this is because he's a Christian. Although he is now here plotting to kill the Emperor Nero with the liar player, the player of the liar, Maximus Battalion, as he thinks, is this homicidal musical assassin. I have to say, looking at what Maximus Battalion looked like in episode 1, a rather frayed and ancient Bart Allison, Nero would have had to have stood very still for a very long time in order to be taken out. He's hardly a crack. It's hardly Day of the Jackal, really, is it? It's sort of Day of the Sloth. He's playing the comedy there, Michael Peake. Hartnell looks great, doesn't he? They all look fantastic in their Roman garb. Would-be murderer. Now, there's a line in that I've got a feeling I know what line Josh is going to choose, and I might have talked through it. I don't think I have. It's now. Yes. Now, the other thing about Derek Francis is that when you get a look at a picture of him, you won't possibly recognise him, because if you know him from Doctor Who, as I did for years, I imagined him. I know he wouldn't have been wearing, the garland that he's got on his head or whatever it is, but the crowd. But I imagined him with hair, even though that's Roman hair. But actually, he's a bald man. Derek Francis, or he's got the hair on the side of the head, but he's a bald man on top. So whenever you see him in anything else, he's got no hair on the top of his head, and it takes you. It's I think when you catch the sort of owl-like nose that you go, that's Derek Francis, and he actually died the day before, a couple of days before his last TV appearance, and he recorded it. He was playing a lead part in a thing called, I think, Winter Sunset, and he died on the. Was it like the 27th of March, 84, and it was broadcast on the 29th, and I think his character died in that. But I didn't register that at the time because that was 1984. So I might have chanced that because it was in the papers, but I didn't. So and I usually sort of lucked out with reading I'd come across such stories and put them in my mental data bank, but I didn't with him. Do I love this? Yes, I love. I mean, that's very, very funnily done. The way that the Doctor is in charge of, accidentally sets off the fire of Rome. He sets off the Inferno. Now, and there's an impressive amount of fire in this episode in the studio. Now, a lot of fire sequences would be done on film because it's easier to control. And, there's no starting and stopping. And, Derek Francis rather bravely wanders around the studio with this, this thing on fire. And this is quite unusual because having an uncontrollable and dangerous if fire can be a substance during a drama was you'd usually get a lot of this stuff done on film, and indeed the starting of the fire, that ingenious thing of it, the sun going through the Doctor's glasses, is done on film. But look, that's still smouldering. Well, it's more than smouldering away there; it's burning. You'll be getting some of that alligator treatment. He's brilliant. They are so good. Look at Maureen O'Brien. She's annoyed at having been grabbed by the arm. She's acting away brilliantly, and she's great look. And I'm really taken with this corridor because I think it's fantastic. It goes all the way back. And again, he's wandering around it. You could see I bet the studio manager's there at the back going, if one more piece of burning paper falls on the floor. I mean, do you think as soon as they go off here, there's 3 people with fire extinguishers? But anyway, there's a lot of fire in this episode. And it's one of those historical event is done by the Doctor. Now we know the Doctor did the Great Fire of London. Now they can be fun little grace notes. Doctor Who was responsible for the Mary. Okay, she's lovely. Doctor Who is responsible for the Great Fire of London. Doctor Who is responsible for the we solve the mystery of the Mary Celeste because of Doctor Who, and it's quite fun when we have those references to an historical event being caused by the Doctor. That's a brilliant shot. That's such a simple shot, but just having it shot from underneath gives it a bit of height. It's not a set that we've seen before, or if it is, we haven't seen it from that angle. And I love that. One of the things I love about television at this time, it's not just that you had to write a story or have an episode, it's that you had to set it within a certain amount of sets, and you had to sort of go, I need a scene where this happens, and which set can I make it happen in, or how can I suggest that with the resources that I've got available in this space with these materials. And it might be that, I'd like to use that set, but that set was in the last episode, and we don't. Is that a wipe? Was that a wipe? Hang on, we've just entered the Empire Strikes Back. Flash Gordon, Star Trek. That was a wipe. You don't get many wipes in early Doctor Who. Wonder why they did a wipe. That was a wipe, wasn't it? I'm not imagining one. There's nobody here. I'm talking to you. That's a very unusual way of shifting the scene, and I wonder why we didn't have more of that kind of thing. I don't think I imagined that. But yes, I love the sort of logistical element of making television at this point. And I'm sure it's the same with modern television, but it manifests itself in different ways. But I love the way you can sometimes spot and go, I can see what they've done there. They've done that at the back of that set and made use of that space, or they've turned that camera around, or they've used those two extras to do that when they were doing that. The marshalling of resources in order to tell the story in an efficient way, or a clever way, or an inventive way, or whatever. Is really nice. The lighting here is very good as well. He's got a great face, hasn't he, Michael Peake? But yes, the Doctor, the Doctor, causing history. He's so good. Well, look at the mad gleam in his eyes. And, this isn't just an actor being, a colourful character. The sort of bonkers Roman emperor thing is a thing. Nero was a Fruit Loop. I think it's Christopher Biggins plays him. I Claudius. And so, the real sort of slightly unhinged thing that Derek Francis is doing is great fun, but it's suitable for the material. We need the character to be like that. There's in history we're aware that Nero was a bit barking. I love to. We need to have a Caligula in Doctor Who at some point. He would be a great Doctor Who villain, although I was first introduced to Caligula in Judge Dredd, where there was Judge Caligula, and they told essentially the same story, although as a youth I pronounced it Caligula. I've done a whole podcast on things I mispronounced. I didn't use that as an example. But then, of course, yes, there's I Claudius. Actually, I think there's references to I Claudius in some of the documentaries on the DVD, which is quite nice. But if you've not seen I Claudius, and you're enjoying your little sojourn to Rome, do I Claudius if you like studio-bound videotape drama full of marvellous actors being brilliant characters. Brian Blessed, oh my goodness, such a good performance. And John Hurt, Sian Phillips, Derek Jacobi. Oh, and, all this, and everyone pops up. Professor Crimpton from the War Machines, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the pirate captain, the Time Lord from Genesis of the Daleks, they're all in it. So that's the death of Sevcheria, and that was pretty grim and done with fire in the studio, no filming. And Sevcheria, if you've noticed, he's gone from being the slave trader to the guy who's ordering around the Roman soldiers. But yeah, he sort of gets his death there. They've cut back to at least emphasise that, so it's not as ignominious as it might have been. And there we go. There's the close-up with a beautiful fire flickering on the face of Michael Peake there. And a little close-up of him clutching his cross to go, that's the explanation. It's never really explained. That's the explanation as to why he's helpful and good, and also organising an assassination. Christopher Barry, I know, was not happy about the fire in Rome. I think that's a great shot. Lovely piece of economy, that. Just the silhouette with the flickering flames on the mountain. I think that's actually rather beautiful. And I love this dark nighttime lighting and some of the flickering flame lighting we had earlier as well. Love that on Michael Peake's face on his final shot. And we get some stock footage, which I can sort of see. Christopher Barry might not have been wild about, but it was, if you wanted big burning buildings, you went to a library and got stuff. But obviously there's no footage of Rome itself burning, so probably if you look closely, you'd go, that's slightly more modern architecture. But I think it gets away with it, and it uses a mixture of different things. That silhouette hill shot, and then I think there's a bit coming up where Nero has the flames sort of superimposed in front of him, and then you get the stock footage, and that's what you have to do. You have to use a few different methods to suggest the bigger picture, and it's the combination of them rather than the success of any one individual. I love that. I think that's brilliant. That's a great shot. And here's the stock footage, which is probably probably a cottage burning in 1934, which is, it's not, but there, that's quite effective, I think. There's the cottage again, or whatever it is. Does that look like it'd been reversed and played? Anyway, yeah, that does look a bit like the aftermath of the Blitz, but there we go. But that's only because I think we're kind of attuned to that, and we know that it's stock footage. So I have missed the line that I think Josh will choose. I was talking through it, and and again, the back of that set is great. There's real depth to it. And he's going to say, "Oh, is this how they hit me over the head?" Yeah, great. Oops, I've been. I'll keep my own counsel there. Acting from Jacqueline Hill. The line is, there's a friend of mine. He's what is it? He smells trouble, but he dives in and he usually finds a way. I like that. He dives in and he usually finds a way. It's sometimes good advice. I think as a comic, I think I might have prospered more in certain circumstances if I just dived in and found a way rather than been cautious. Because if you're cautious, if things are looking like they're going to be tough and you're cautious anyway, the toughness still comes. Whereas if you sort of just throw caution to the wind and just have a bash, I think sometimes it's and with acting as well, sometimes I think if you're a little bit self-conscious, and I have only talked about acting and comedy because they're what tend to be the situations where I would dive in and usually find a way. And I think when you do that, you might be better off. So I think it's a good philosophy, and it's a great description of Doctor Who, of the Doctor, of the character. So I think that might be what Josh chooses, and it is a lovely line. There's some great lines in this. There is a lot of fantastic wordplay that I've occasionally talked over and allowed the farce to flourish. There's part of me when just before the Doctor and Vicky get back, which we're seeing here, when Ian and Barbara are sort of hitting each other with pillows and pushing each other about, that part of me does go, oh, please start having sex. And I don't mean that in a pervy way. I just love them. And they're such good fun and friends that I want them to fall into bed with each other. Now, there's part of me also that goes, oh yeah, but you don't want to ruin it, because when it rears its head, it can complicate things. But I don't think it would with Ian and Barbara. And as I say, I don't mean this in a pervy way at all. I don't write. Is it called shipping? No. /fiction. I don't know. I honestly don't. That's not my deal. But I just want Ian and Barbara to get married. And also, yeah, go on, kiss her, Ian. Kiss her hard on the mouth. Oh yes. Oh. Oh, I love them. And do you know what I love about this? It's utterly charming, and I think that's been the delight. And I've only sort of realised that through looking and seeing how younger people are enjoying 60s Doctor Who, which I would never have imagined. This is a beautiful model shot, isn't it? And I sort of sometimes think of all the hard work that goes into a model shot that's on screen for no seconds at all. Though actually, this one's actually, they're lingering on this for quite a while. But I do love a model shot, and you think of all the meticulous little bits and detail to go on for something that's there and gone, or in that case, there and there and there and, or should we go? And actually, I'm not used to the ending of this because for ages I had the UK Gold version, which sort of pauses when they go off and get changed, and it doesn't have the cliffhanger. So I've probably seen the cliffhanger at the end of the Romans only probably 2 or 3 times in my life. Yeah, which is quite low for me in the bits of Doctor Who that I've seen, stakes, because I've probably seen the Romans itself. That's where it ended. And it had the horrible stand-in sort of computer type static slide caption computer things that UK Gold or whoever it was put on to close the episode because they didn't have the lead into the next one or whatever. So so this is the lead into the next episode, the Web Planet. So I'm not really used to this and that horrible sort of sound that's quite discombobulating. We're being to what? Oh, look at his face. He's such a good facial actor. To what? Oh, and then the next episode caption tells us to what? To the Web Planet. The guest cast is sort of done in order of appearance, which is why Derek Francis is near the bottom. There's a whole podcast. Oh, I might have done it already on, when what order the cast list goes in, which probably is only of interest to me. Anyway, that was great. So I hadn't finished what I was saying. And I'm aware that I say the young people a lot, but it's when you sort of hang around on Twitter and social media and you look at what creative people are doing and people who are sometimes people discovering Doctor Who, and you're seeing people much younger than you talking about these old episodes that I've chatted to with my mates about over the years. But when I see younger people doing it, one of the things that other people's perspectives are very helpful and very useful. And I think you always learn from other people's perspectives, and our instinct is often to dismiss them because we know what we've got in our head and we're very set in our ways, and none of us like to change, and certainly change our opinions or have our opinions challenged, even benignly, And I've always looked at sort of old Who as yes, it's educational, it's weird. I think that was my thing when I did Running Through Corridors. I thought the 60s, the Hartnell era in particular, is as weird as Doctor Who ever gets, and I thought that was quite a good angle to take with it, and I enjoyed looking at it from that perspective, and how the show develops like that, and how strange it is, and then the historicals which are educational, and then gradually, because of Dennis Spooner, have that sort of the wittiness that goes into them before they then go into a slightly different kind of comedy, but the wonderful comedy of Donald Cotton, which is a bit more sophisticated yet utterly daft. It's an odd mix of sort of highbrow and very lowbrow, but I don't think I'd realised until I saw sort of younger people falling in love with Ian and Barbara and revelling in the sort of dynamic of those early crews. I think particularly this quartet, because I think Susan's at her best when she's a bit strange and unearthly and a bit weird, whereas Vicky is such a delightful adventurer, and Maureen O'Brien is so good at being sort of perky and charming. And that charming is the word. This is what I'm beginning to learn, and how I'm beginning to view a lot of these 60s stories on sort of revisiting them now, is how charming the series is at this point. And I'm charmed by the characters and by the chemistry between them. And yes, Ian is the square-jawed hero. And yes, Barbara is the intelligent history teacher who, occasionally has to tell the Doctor off and be the sort of conscience of the piece. And yes, the Doctor is the, crabby but eccentric and occasionally hooting with laughter, sort of crazy eccentric adventurer. And Vicky is this sort of wide-eyed, innocent, young adventurer. But there's a lovely, charming dynamic between them, and I sort of I want to come on adventures with them, and the fact that you see them there preserved as they are, and and Hartnell's no longer with us, nor is Jacqueline Hill, and William Russell is now 98, and there's and I love them, I love him now, and Maureen is a very nice woman, and I'm lucky enough to know her a little. We exchange emails every now and again, and she's terrific, very intelligent woman, and I like her a lot. She's a smart cookie, and she's good fun, and yeah, I like her a lot. And it's but seeing them preserved at that time. I love that gang, which I've always liked Doctor Who, but I think that's a relatively new development for me. And and that is partially through seeing, people 10, 15, 20 years younger than me be utterly charmed by these, what could be, fusty old relics from the past, slightly different acting styles, black and white, slower pace of adventures. But they've been charmed and they've been captured and they've been delighted and they've been beguiled by the sheer sort of fun and verve and enjoyment. It's a different, characters are different in those days. Nowadays, characters sort of have to wear their inner trauma on their sleeve. They have to have an inner struggle or a turmoil or to be overcoming something, or and I understand that. And there's a place for sort of more sophistication, if you like, in delving into the psyches of our heroes. But that's not the only way to do things, and it doesn't mean that the way they did things in those days was bad or worse, and in fact, actually, it would be nice to have a hero who isn't overly complicated and who isn't, navel-gazing or troubled or broken or sad or, the victim of their own flaws or of society's flaws or whatever. There's something about the joyful escapism of, and Doctor Who has to be joyful escapism. Yes, it can, make political points and be angry and powerful and satirical and dark and spooky, but it also, it's escapism and adventure and fun. And when I want to talk about Doctor Who to other people, I want to talk about it with a big, broad, stupid smile on my face. Because although it terrified me as a kid, although it excited me, although the adventures got me going and guessing and wide-eyed and scared, it was never not fun. Do you know what I mean? And this hobby, this mad hobby of ours, should never not be fun, because the minute a hobby stops being fun is, well, you're Victor Kennedy, aren't you? You're the guy who comes and sucks the joy out of it for everybody. And I hadn't realised, I think, just how much fun one could have with the Hartnell gang. I watched The Time Meddler recently, which is a story I was always sort of like, yeah, it's fine, but it's not that funny. And the supporting characters are all a bit boring. So it's only really, the TARDIS crew and Peter Butterworth, and that's a big ask for 4 episodes. And I watched it and also because it's quite a popular one, and because it always does better than The Crusade, which I think is a much better script, and it's deadly serious and written in iambic pentameter, and it's got Shakespearean actors in it. Toby. And I do love The Crusade, but we'll talk about that some other time. But I watched The Time Meddler with a load of fans at the BFI for the launch of the season 2 box set, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved being in a room with loads of people, some older than me, some even older and crustier than I, but also some younger fans, some of whom had never seen it before, some of whom had and loved it already, and just being with that cross-generational. Emily Cook was there, Beth Axford was there, loads of young people. And, well, one, I felt part of a community, and two, I just, being in that room where there was so much joy and so much love for these, these people who are either very old or now dead, was what a wonderful and charming thing, that something that was made in no more spectacular or special a way than any other television at the time, and in fact under sometimes more difficult circumstances, that has done that and continues to do that. And I love that, and I love how charming. And I think The Romans, because it's a comedy, has the charm coming out of its ears a bit more than some of the sci-fi stories which have to do some other things. And of course, because it's Doctor Who's first attempt at sort of, quite a large ratio of comedy to drama, it's not going to be to everybody's taste, because it sort of has to go as far as Doctor Who really ever does with comedy. But again, like the Caves of Androzani that I did last time, it would be boring if Doctor Who was all like the Caves of Androzani. And actually, Doctor Who is not the Caves of Androzani, but the Caves of Androzani can exist and shine because it is within the context of Doctor Who, and it's got enough of Doctor Who about it that it's a particularly dark and grim and gritty Doctor Who. That means it's quite a special Doctor Who because it, for once, does some of those things that Doctor Who doesn't normally do. But the rest of Doctor Who has to exist for it to shine like that. And I'd say it's the same with the Romans. You wouldn't want every week Doctor Who to be a ridiculous farce that messes about with history and has the characters literally doing the farcy stuff of, running past each other in the, running one of them running out of the action as the other runs in and they've just missed each other. But the fact that there is a Doctor Who story where that happens and the fact that it's the Romans that happens means the Romans is bloody great. And I love the fact that you have that thing that they have that Ian and Barbara have an adventure that the Doctor and Vicky haven't got a clue about. I love all of that. So I've really enjoyed watching the Romans. I found episode 3 a bit more difficult, but I think I'd again got into my head, it's the slightly long episode. So oddly, I had less to say for episode 3 than I just have. And I didn't even really finish my points about how I feel about the Doctor meddling in history. There's part of me that loves it because you go, I quite like it that our silly time traveller, will. And I love it with the Romans because he sort of accidentally, sort of almost incidentally sets the fire, and it's a bit of a sort of mistake. I prefer that to the oncoming storm. The guy who's the stuff of legend. I don't buy that because I don't feel like the stuff of legend. So. But I do feel like somebody who bumbles away and tries to succeed, even sometimes through incompetence, but with a, diving in and usually finding a way. I can identify with that in a way that I can't identify with being, an all-powerful, sad. Sad strider through time, who has been involved with all of the key events in world history. So I have a complicated relationship with the Doctor being responsible for historical events, and I think my preference is when it's a funny little grace note or even an accident. Rather than if it's a sign that the Doctor is this powerful steerer of key events in time. I prefer that he's a bit of a pesky meddler who accidentally knocks stone. I'd be quite happy if he actually caught his elbow on the corner of one of the Stonehenge stones and knocked the rest of them over, than if he was there whipping the stone beasts into shape at the dawn of time. So look, I think Josh will choose for episode 4. So now I'm playing the game, you see. I think he's going to choose the line, I have a friend called the Doctor, he looks for trouble, he dives in and usually finds a way. And if that is correct, I have no idea if he's chosen that or not, and I'm going to feel like an idiot if he hasn't. Because as soon as I thought about this episode and I thought of that line, I thought, he said he's choosing a line. That's got to be the line. And the scene, which is his overall thing, which is his favourite thing, it's either going to be the Doctor playing the lyre. But he's already kind of half chosen that because he chose the line, he's not that good. Or it's going to be, it might be the accidental setting fire of Rome, which I think is lovely. And I think it's great that, we have a great historical event as a bit of a joke in this very silly story. But it fits tonally. It's perfect. And again, well done for having so much fire in the studio and pulling it off. But my favourite scene is the death of Tigellinus. And I'd feel daft if I didn't choose that. And again, as I said last time, I have a very complex relationship with that because it's it sort of goes against a lot of my instincts. But I've been thinking about this because I was thinking when I was sort of tying myself up in knots about whether, we can be funny about what is essentially an attempted sexual assault. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. In the same way, and I mentioned, oh, yes, but I've, never been the victim of such a thing, so therefore, what about people? But, I mean, there are things that cause me great emotional distress that I can still laugh at somebody doing a joke about if it's a good enough joke and if it's in a disarming context. There's nothing sort of glib or reveling or titillating or exploitative about any of the, and I use very inverted commas, sexual content in the Romans. It's, even though the comedy is about a man chasing a woman, it's farce. We're never supposed to take it too seriously. We know that he's never going to get to the point where he gets her alone in his bedroom. Do you know what I mean? Part of the knowledge of that comedy form is that it's never going to happen, and it's sort of guessing how she's going to get out of it, and who's going to burst in just before. It's the whole thing about frustrated desire. The comedy comes from us watching the constant scuppering of the plans of the predator, if you like. And also it's farce, it's heightened, it's silly. And there are, as I say, there are very, very serious things that make me cry when I think about them, or very upset when I remember them or contemplate them, that if a good comic does in a clever or instructive or just a funny way, where I think it would ill behove me to go, that's a good joke. But Joe Lycett did a joke recently when I saw him, when he talked about throwing a croissant across the room and saying it was like a boomerang with psoriasis. He got a massive laugh. And psoriasis is something I've been hospitalized with and had head to foot, and it causes me great distress. And I've seen pictures of myself with it, and when I've had it very badly, it's been like an icicle through my soul to have a look at myself and the detritus that cascades from my face and my head, and it makes me ashamed and it's physically painful. But I think it would. I think to then see a comedian do a joke about it where it's not really about it, I could easily, dampen the mood and go, well, I think you'll find that I have psoriasis and it's very, very serious. Or I could go, well, that's just a joke, and he's not using. And people are very thoughtless, and people do say thoughtless things about a skin condition when you have a very bad one all of the time, and it's grating, it's horrible. And is that facilitated by sometimes comedians being glib about it? Yeah, maybe, but I think that's a price worth paying for there being more jokes in the world myself, because jokes are generally nice and good, and most comedians are just trying to put a smile on your face, and I think that's all the Romans is trying to do. So anyway, the doctor's line, Ian's line about the doctor is going to be my choice for episode 4, because I'm playing by Josh's rules. The poisoning of Tigellinus is going to be the bonus thing, and if they choose both of those things, I will have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. So the chances of it happening, it's unlikely to happen, isn't it? I'm going to miss now, like Vicky missed Barbara in the corridors of Rome. So, Josh Snares, episode 4.
When I was looking at episode 4, I wasn't sure if I was going to do this entire scene or just an individual line, because there's just so many good lines in it. But it's the scene where the doctor obviously knows that he's going to be fed to the lions. So he says the amazing line, "Yes, well, I promise you, I shall try to make it a roaring success." I love a stupid pun, and I love endless puns in a row, but that one's my ultimate favourite in that scene.
Oh, well, there we are. I was certain they were going to choose the line about the doctor specialising in trouble, and they've gone for a silly, terrible, but great pun. Well, there we go. Well, so much for victory from the jaws of defeat. I mean, I didn't even get anywhere near I mean, I think I'd been gobbled up. I think I'm in the digestive tract of defeat. I didn't stay long enough in the jaws. So it doesn't really matter what scene he chooses, but let's just see, because them's the rules, and somebody else's insight is always interesting. So is Josh, who's done a video and is in front of some beautiful trees, and is looking and has a wonderful lustrous head of hair. I'm very envious where I have none. Josh has I would say my share, and is looking splendid.
So for my fifth and final moment, I've decided to choose my all-time favourite scene from this story, which is where the Doctor pretends to play the liar. Now, you may think I'm cheating because I kind of said episode 3 was that one, but you know what? I don't care. I can do whatever I like. You don't make the rules, Toby. I make the rules. But, you know, when I think about the story, it's the first thing I think about. And it's one of those moments where it really cemented, oh no, this is my favourite era.
Josh, you are perfectly entitled to make the rules. I'm resigned to losing, so I may as well lose your way rather than mine, because what I also like about the very flimsy premise of this podcast is that although it's largely me talking, which is largely a practical decision, is that everybody that comes in interprets the remit their way, and they each have their own ways of expressing their love for Doctor Who, and then in turn their love for the particular Doctor Who that they have chosen. And I like that because it opens up different perspectives. And as I say, I think it's very important in life. I think, you know, I've just turned 49, and I am so resistant to things that are new. I just out of instinct, you know, when I see younger people, and it's partially because I've got kids, so when they express an opinion, it automatically grates against my brain, because it's like, you don't even know how to make a cup of coffee. Why are you telling me about world politics? But actually, then you have I don't say that to you. You have long conversations with them, and you go, oh yeah, my son may be, you know, half my age, less than half, you know, more than half my age. But that's no reason why for him not to know more about something than I do, because he's perfectly capable of reading and researching, and I don't know everything. In fact, there's loads I know absolutely nothing about. But you're sort of we're wired to sort of go, yes, but we're older, so we know more, because they don't know some things. Now, there's certain life lessons that they certainly don't know, and I sometimes have to wearily impart, or wearily bite my tongue and think, well, no point me imparting that now, because you'll only get offended, but I'll just wait for you to discover that, and I'll catch you when you fall. But it's a threat as a 48, 49-year-old man, especially one that has had reason to feel slightly less relevant in the past couple. I mean, essentially got, you know, I've had a couple of intimations in my work life of kind of, yeah, you won't be used for that. You're a bit over the hill. You're not very relevant or whatever. And you sort of go, oh God, and so it's. You have to be very careful, because one way to combat that is to go, well, I'm feeling irrelevant because of all these young people who don't know anything. God, the world's going to be terrible with them in charge because they don't know things that I know. And the other way of turning that around is to go, no, they're understanding the world in a way that you don't, because they've got their perspective, and it's the world that is going to be created around them, because they're the ones that are creating the world now. And you can either live in it and try and understand it and not be threatened by it, or you can just sit there being pissed off and grumpy and sometimes willfully not understanding. So it was actually a Doctor Who director. It was John Gorrie who directed The Keys of Marinus, because I think sometimes when I interview people who worked in old Doctor Who, you know, my temptation is to go, and of course it was marvellous in those days, wasn't it? You had time to rehearse, and it was the Acton Hilton, and you got proper performances. And he said, I don't do that thing of going, things were better then and things are rubbish now. He said things change, and they change just inevitably and because of the passage of time, and one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just different. And I always try and learn from the new things and the things coming through. And I thought that was really instructive. And I think you're happier if you go, well, look, there's loads of things going on in the sort of culture wars and the political sphere at the moment that baffle me. But they baffle me because they're new, or because I don't quite understand, or I haven't quite worked them out yet. But that's okay. That doesn't have to be a threat. One doesn't have to be threatened by something that one doesn't understand, in the same way that one doesn't have to be threatened by young people coming in and interpreting Doctor Who in their way, or expressing their love for Doctor Who in their way, or doing that, you benefit from things that are different, or things that, change your mind about a certain thing, or give you a new perspective. As I say, this charming element of the Hartnell era, and Josh says it's his favourite era of the show. I think that's absolutely lovely, and I take no sense of ownership of it, because we all like Doctor Who in our different ways. And it's quite helpful, because I think it is easy to be grumpy and to be cross and to be intransigent and to go, well, I don't like that, because it's not what I'm used to, and what I'm not used to then makes me feel threatened about where my place is. And it might just be we're in a different place and getting different stimuli, but that doesn't mean they have to be worse. Don't think so anyway. I went off on one a bit there, all on the back of one of the silliest Doctor Who stories of all time that has no pretense to be anything other than loopy entertainment. I think the writer Dennis Spooner went, I'm going to see how far I can push this for a laugh, and does. And I wouldn't want all Doctor Who to be like the Romans. But because we have all of Doctor Who, it means that the Romans, in its own term, shines. It burns like an inferno.
Well, that's it. That's all my 5 moments. Thank you so much for inviting me, Toby, and I hope this podcast will be a roaring success. Okay, I'll stop now. And just like Rome, how it burnt to the ground, so did the BBC's archives. If you want to know more about how certain episodes came back, please watch my Missing Episodes series, where I talk about how these episodes return to the archive. Sometimes the story behind the episodes are a little bit more interesting than the plot themselves. Thank you yet again, Toby, for involving me in this podcast. I feel so honoured to be involved with anything attached to your name.
Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Josh Snares, who can be found all over the internet, particularly YouTube, Josh Snares, where they have lots of gorgeous and glorious content. I'm grateful to Josh and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Cirillo, and Frank Shales. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you too would like to be a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where you get advance releases, bonus materials, including bits of my stand-up, behind the scenes of my Blu-ray and DVD antics, your very own podcast, Far Too Much Information, and of course everything far in advance of the non-Patreon type of consumer. And if you're one of those, maybe you could go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock and throw a few shekels into my hat when you've got a moment, if I do something that you particularly enjoy, or you want to make a one-off donation, or I sound particularly hungry, or a combination of all of those things. But if you can't or don't fancy a financial contribution, and that's totally understandable, I'm just grateful to you for listening. You could do something that costs you nothing, and that's go to iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. I now have a YouTube channel where all of these are available, so click on those as well, like and subscribe and do all of that business. But 5-star ratings and a few lines of positive review really help to polish the old algorithms. I'm also all over social media. I'm on Blue Sky Toby Hadoke at. Well, I'm easy to find. I'm the only person with my name, and I'm on. I'm still on Twitter/X. Sorry, I'm on YouTube. As I say, I've got a channel there where these podcasts go out with a sort of placeholder graphic, if that's how you particularly like to enjoy these. One of my children told me to do that, so I did, and so a boost there would be good. And I have a Facebook page, and I'm also on Instagram at toby.hadoke. God, what a whore. I think that'll do. Here's a post-credit thing. Here we go. I can't remember what the post-credit stuff was on the 4 episodes of this. There was probably some sort of wisdom or magic. But I always insist on re-recording the endings for these omnibuses. Omnibuses? It is omnibuses. It's not omnibi, just the same as it's factotums, not fact. Yeah, anyway, let's not get into that. I could do a whole thing on Latin. Veni, vidi, vici. It's like they didn't pronounce the V's, you see. So when people say Veni, vidi, vici, I believe they are wrong. That is what I was taught when I did Latin many, many years ago, when it was still being spoken in some countries. But yes, I did Latin. I did Greek. Oh, goodness me. What? Oh, well, I think it might have done me a little bit of good in terms of knowing the meanings of words that are unfamiliar, because I can trace them back to their Latin meaning or whatever, but only subconsciously. I mean, if you ask me to, if you ask me to pass myself off in Latin, I don't think I'd manage it. But I think the classics are rather fun, aren't they? Lots of exciting stories. Yeah, I don't think anyone loses out by having a classical education. Much to gain as well, but I don't think it's fashionable these days. But lots of swords and fighting and conquest and it's all, yeah. I mean, obviously it probably wasn't much fun to be part of, but that's like anything, isn't it? Comedy is, what is it? Comedy is watching a man sleeping on a banana skin. Tragedy is if you're that man. Well, exciting history is swords and bloodshed and murder, but living history, yeah, tragedy is if you lived then. So we're pretty lucky, all told. I wonder what people will think when they look back on our times, if there's anybody left. Anyway, let's not get into that. Bye.